My children deliberately forgot about me for 15 straight years. I kept calling, sending gifts, and visiting, but I never got a response. They treated me like a ghost, a shameful secret from a past they wanted to bury. I grew tired of begging for their love and decided to stop. I changed my full name, sold my house, and disappeared without a trace. They thought they were finally free of the old truck driver who embarrassed them. But 2 months later, I came back. Not as their father, but as the man who was about to buy their entire lives out from under them. I am Montgomery Freeman, though the world now knows me as M.J. Stone. At 68 years old, I should be enjoying my retirement fishing on a lake or teaching my grandchildren how to throw a baseball. Instead, I am sitting in the back of a high-end auction house in Buckhead, Atlanta, watching the people I gave life to sell my memories to the highest bidder. My hands, once rough from gripping a steering wheel for 40 years, are now manicured and resting on the handle of a cane I do not really need. I am wearing a $5,000 Italian suit that my son Darnell would not recognize because he never looked past my grease-stained work shirt. Before I continue this story of justice, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to family who underestimated your worth. The auction room smelled of lavender and old money. My son Darnell stood near the podium looking nervous. He was 40 years old but still had the posture of a child waiting to be scolded. Next to him was his wife Sloan. She was a petite woman with blonde hair sprayed into a helmet of perfection and eyes that scanned the room like a predator looking for a wounded animal. They were selling the house I had built with my own 2 hands, the house where my late wife Lucille and I had raised Darnell, the house I had been forced to vacate legally just weeks prior because I wanted them to believe I had given up. I adjusted my glasses and listened to Sloan whisper to a potential buyer near the front. Her voice carried sharp and nasally. She said, "Honestly, we are just selling it for the land value. The structure itself is a teardown. It smells of damp wood and, well, you know, that particular odor of the working class." She laughed, a tinkling sound that made my blood run cold. Darnell just nodded, fixing his tie. He did not defend the home where his mother had died. He did not defend the porch where I taught him to read. He just wanted the check. The auctioneer cleared his throat. "We are starting the bidding for the property at 450 Oak Street at $500,000. Do I hear 500? A man in a gray suit raised his hand. 500. 550, another voice called out. Sloan rolled her eyes. "Come on," she hissed to Darnell. "This is taking too long." I told you we should have just bulldozed it first. Who wants a relic like that?" 600,000 someone else offered. The price was crawling up slowly. 650. 700. Darnell looked disappointed. They were hoping for $1 million purely for the land in this gentrifying neighborhood. I watched them sweat. I watched Sloan tap her expensive heels impatiently on the floor. She looked at her watch, probably calculating how soon she could leave this place and pretend it never existed. Going once at 700,000, the auctioneer shouted. I waited. I let the silence hang in the air for a second. I wanted them to feel the disappointment. I wanted them to think they had failed. Going twice, the auctioneer raised his gavel. I lifted my paddle. Number 405. $2 million, I said. My voice was deep, steady, and loud enough to rattle the crystal chandelier above us. The room went completely silent. Heads turned. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd, but I did not look at the crowd. I looked straight at them. Darnell's jaw dropped. Sloan froze her mouth slightly open, her eyes widening as she calculated the commission. $2 million was 3 times the value of the property. It was insane. It was aggressive. It was the move of a man who had money to burn and did not care who got burned with it. "Sold," the auctioneer shouted, slamming the gavel down before anyone else could breathe. "To the gentleman in the back for $2 million. Sloan recovered instantly. The look of boredom vanished, replaced by a predatory hunger. She grabbed Darnell's arm and practically dragged him through the crowd toward me. I stayed seated, leaning back, crossing my legs. I watched them approach. They did not see their father. They saw a suit. They saw a gold watch. They saw a walking ATM. I had shaved my gray beard. I had dyed my hair. I was wearing tinted glasses. But still, a part of me hoped Darnell would recognize my eyes. A part of me hoped he would see the man who carried him on his shoulders. "Excuse me, sir," Sloan said, her voice dripping with sudden sweetness. She extended a hand, her nails painted a perfect crimson. I am Sloan Freeman, and this is my husband Darnell. We just wanted to personally thank you for seeing the true potential of our property. You must be a developer with incredible vision. I did not stand up. I looked at her hand, then up at her face. I did not shake it. I am MJ Stone, I said. My voice roughened by years of smoking cigars. I never actually smoked. A little affectation I added for the character. And I am not a developer, Mrs. Freeman. I am a collector. Darnell stepped forward nervously, wiping his sweaty palms on his pants. A collector, sir. You collect old houses. I collect things that people have thrown away, I said, looking Darnell dead in the eye. I find that people are often too quick to discard things they think are broken, but usually the foundation is still strong. It is just the people living inside who are rotten. Sloan laughed, a nervous, high-pitched sound. Oh, you are absolutely right, Mr. Stone. You are so right. That house, honestly, it was a burden. The previous owner, well, let us just say he let it go to ruin. He was a very difficult man, not the kind of person you would want in a neighborhood like this. We are just glad a man of your stature is taking it over. My grip tightened on my cane. She was talking about me to my face. She was calling me a burden while standing in front of the man who had paid for her first car. I see, I said, keeping my tone even. So, you are happy to be rid of it. Thrilled, she said. It is a fresh start for us. With this capital, Darnell's logistics company can finally expand. We are very forward-thinking people, Mr. Stone. We do not like to dwell on the past. I stood up then, towering over them. I was 6'2", and even at 68 I was broad. Darnell took a half step back, intimidated. Forward-thinking, I repeated. I like that. I am looking for investment opportunities in Atlanta. If your husband is in logistics, perhaps we have more to discuss than just this house. Sloane's eyes practically turned into dollar signs. She elbowed Darnell hard in the ribs. Yes, Darnell stammered. Yes, absolutely. We are looking for strategic partners. My firm is growing. I knew his firm was bleeding money. I knew he was 2 months away from bankruptcy. I had read his financial reports before breakfast. Excellent, I said. But I do not do business in auction halls. I prefer to know the people I am working with. I want to see the soul of the people I give my money to. Anything, Mr. Stone, Sloan said, moving closer, invading my personal space. Name it. Dinner, I said. Tonight. At the house I just bought. Sloan blinked. At the old house. But Mr. Stone, it is empty. There is no furniture. The electricity might not even be on. Surely a restaurant would be more appropriate. I want to eat in the house, I said, my voice leaving no room for argument. Bring food, bring wine, bring your family. I want to see how you say goodbye to a place. It tells me a lot about a person's character. If you want my investment, you will be there at 7 p.m. sharp. Darnell looked uneasy. He looked at the floor, shifting his weight. There was something about my voice that was triggering a memory in his lizard brain, something familiar he could not place. Is there a problem, Mr. Freeman? I asked, dropping my voice lower. No, Darnell said quickly, looking up. No problem. We will be there. Good, I said. And bring your sister. Tanisha, isn't it? And your brother-in-law. I like to meet the whole clan. Sloan stiffened. How did you know about... I research my investments. Mrs. Freeman, I cut her off. I know everything about this property, and everything about the people who owned it. Do not disappoint me. I turned and walked away without waiting for a response. I felt their eyes burning into my back. I could hear Sloan whispering excitedly to Darnell, telling him that they had just hooked a whale. She was calculating how much more she could get out of me. She did not know that the whale was actually a shark, and there was blood in the water. As I walked out of the auction house into the bright Atlanta sun, I pulled my phone from my pocket. I dialed my lawyer, Mr. Hirsch. It is done, I said. Did they suspect anything? Hirsch asked, his voice dry and professional. No, I said. They are too blinded by greed to see what is right in front of them. They invited the wolf into the henhouse. Hirsch. Are you sure you want to go through with this? Monty Hirsch asked. Once you step back into that house tonight, there is no going back. You are going to hurt them. I stopped by my car, looking at my reflection in the window, the expensive suit, the tinted glasses, the stranger looking back at me. They hurt me first, I said softly. They killed Montgomery Freeman 15 years ago. MJ Stone is just here to bury the body. I hung up the phone. Tonight I would walk through the front door of my own home as a guest. Tonight I would watch them scramble to serve me in the very dining room where they used to refuse to eat with me because my clothes smelled like diesel. Tonight the lesson begins, and I promise you it will be a lesson they will never forget. Walking through the front door of 450 Oak Street felt like stepping into a mausoleum built on top of my own grave. Sloan had certainly been busy in the few hours since the auction. The cozy warmth that Lucille and I had cultivated for 40 years was gone. In its place was a sterile coldness. The oak floors I had laid myself were covered in white rugs that looked too expensive to step on. The smell of my pipe tobacco and Lucille's pot roast had been replaced by an aggressive chemical lemon scent that burned the inside of my nose. It smelled like a hospital where memories went to die. I tightened my grip on my cane and walked further into the foyer. My Italian leather shoes clicked sharply against the wood. I was entering the lion's den, but the lions had no idea they had just invited the hunter to dinner. From the living room I heard voices. They were hushed, but carried the distinct sharp edge of complaint. I stopped just outside the archway, hidden by a large potted fern that Sloan had likely rented for the evening. It was my daughter Tanisha. Her voice was the same as it had been when she was a teenager, asking for money, whiny and entitled. "I cannot believe you guys sold it so fast," she was saying. "I thought we were going to wait until the old man was declared legally dead. What if he comes back? What if he shows up looking for his recliner?" I felt a sharp pain in my chest, but it wasn't my heart. It was the realization that my daughter didn't miss me. She was just afraid I would return to claim what was mine. "Let him show up," a male voice replied. It was Bradley, her husband, the man who had never held a job for longer than 6 months. "If he shows up, we will just call the cops. Tell them a senile old vagrant is trespassing. He probably does not even remember who we are by now. The last time I saw him, he looked like he was losing it, just mumbling about his truck and his dead wife. It was pathetic, honestly. I clenched my jaw so hard I thought a tooth might crack. Pathetic. That was what they thought of the man who had paid for their wedding. I took a deep breath, adjusted my silk tie, and stepped into the room. "Good evening," I said, my voice booming off the walls. The room went silent. Tanisha jumped, spilling a drop of her red wine on the white rug. Bradley stood up quickly, buttoning his jacket. They looked at me with wide eyes. They did not see Monty Freeman, the father they had discarded. They saw M.J. Stone, the $2 million man. Tanisha recovered first. She put on a smile that did not reach her eyes. It was a smile made of glass, fragile and sharp. "Mr. Stone," she said, walking over with her hand extended. "I am Tanisha. Sloan told us so much about you. We are so honored you could join us for dinner in our humble family home." Family home. The words tasted like ash in my mouth. I took her hand. It was cold. "A pleasure," I lied. "Your sister-in-law tells me this house holds many memories." "Oh, ancient history," Bradley chimed in, stepping forward to shake my hand vigorously. He had a weak grip and palms that were too soft. "We are a family that looks to the future, Mr. Stone. We do not get bogged down in the past. I am Bradley, by the way. I have heard you are a man who knows a good investment when he sees one." I looked at Bradley. He was wearing a suit that was too tight and a watch that was too big. He looked like a child playing dress-up in his father's clothes. "I am always looking for potential," I said, holding his gaze until he blinked and looked away. "But I find that the past often predicts the future, young man." Sloan entered from the kitchen carrying a tray of appetizers that looked too small to feed a bird. "Ah, everyone has met," she chirped, her voice high and strained. "Please, Mr. Stone, sit down. Let us celebrate our new partnership." We sat at the dining table. It was the same table where I had carved turkeys for Thanksgiving. The same table where I had helped Darnell with his math homework. Now I sat at the head of the table, not as a father, but as a stranger. They poured me expensive wine and watched me drink it, waiting for me to speak, waiting for me to open my wallet. So Mr. Stone Bradley started before we had even been served the first course. "I know you are into logistics, but I have a proposition that is going to disrupt the entire tech industry in Atlanta. It is an app." I swirled the wine in my glass, watching the red liquid coat the sides. "I am listening," I said. "It is called Gentrifine," Bradley said, looking proud of himself. "It helps high-net-worth individuals find neighborhoods that are up and coming before the prices skyrocket. It filters out the noise. You know, it flags areas where the demographics are shifting favorably." I set my glass down slowly. "By shifting favorably, I assume you mean displacing the current residents," I said. My voice was calm, but inside I was screaming. Bradley laughed, waving his hand dismissively. Well, that is just the nature of progress, isn't it? Look, let us be real, Mr. Stone. You and I, we are businessmen. We know that some people are just dead weight on the economy. Take this neighborhood, for example. Before people like Darnell and Sloan stepped up, this place was crawling with them. Crawling with whom I asked. You know, Bradley said, leaning in as if sharing a secret. The old guard. People who refuse to adapt. They sit on their porches all day collecting checks, bringing down the property value. They are lazy. They expect a handout just because they have lived here for 50 years. My father-in-law was one of them. A total drain on the system. He drove a truck, can you believe that? No ambition. Just happy to be mediocre. We are doing the city a favor by pushing them out. The room seemed to drop 10 degrees. I looked at Darnell. He was staring at his plate, refusing to meet my eyes. He was letting this stranger insult his father, his heritage, and his history. He said nothing. I see, I said softly. So you believe that a man who works with his hands has no ambition. You believe that because someone is old and poor, they are garbage to be swept away. Bradley blinked, sensing he might have gone too far, but then he looked at my expensive suit and reassured himself. I mean, not garbage, he backtracked. But let us be honest. They are not like us, Mr. Stone. They do not have the vision. I stared at him. He was using the N-word without saying it. He was wrapping his racism in the language of economics, assuming that because I was wealthy, I was on his side. He thought money washed away my blackness. He thought green was the only color that mattered to me. I reached into the inside pocket of my jacket. The conversation stopped. All four of them leaned forward, their eyes glued to my hand. I pulled out my checkbook. It was a heavy leather-bound book. I placed it on the table. How much do you need for this app, Bradley? I asked. Bradley's eyes widened. He licked his lips. 50,000, he said. To start. That gets you 10% equity. I opened the checkbook. I took out my fountain pen. It was a heavy, gold-plated pen that I had bought specifically for this moment. I unscrewed the cap slowly. I will give you 100,000, I said. Sloan gasped. Bradley looked like he was going to faint. 100. Mr. Stone, you will not regret this. This is the seed money we need. We are going to clean up this city. I started to write. I wrote the date slowly. I wrote the name Bradley Miller. I wrote the amount, $100,000. My handwriting was jagged, aggressive. Then I stopped. I held the pen over the signature line. The ink was flowing heavily from the nib. It was a special ink, thick and permanent. I looked up at Bradley. There is just one thing, I said. Anything, Bradley said, his voice trembling with greed. I do not like clean hands, I said. What Bradley asked, confused. You said you want to clean up the city, I said. But you have never done a day of hard labor in your life. Your hands are soft, Bradley. They are the hands of a man who takes, not a man who builds. I stood up, holding the check in one hand and the open pen in the other. I extended the check toward him. Here, I said. Take it. Bradley reached out eagerly. As his fingers grabbed the edge of the check, I deliberately squeezed the reservoir of the fountain pen. A thick, black stream of ink shot out. It splattered across the check, covering the amount, and sprayed all over Bradley's hand and his white cuff. Oh, God, Bradley yelled, pulling his hand back. The black ink looked like oil on his skin. It dripped onto the white rug. Sloan jumped up. My rug. I did not apologize. I did not offer a napkin. I just stood there, capping the pen calmly. It seems things got a little messy, I said, my voice devoid of emotion. But that is the nature of business, isn't it, Bradley? Sometimes the dirt you try to sweep away comes back to stain you. But the check, Bradley stammered, looking at the ruined piece of paper in his hand. It is ruined. I smiled a cold, thin smile. I will write you another one, I said, when you prove to me that you can wash that stain off your hands. But be warned, young man, that ink is permanent. It does not come out easily, just like the past. I turned to Darnell, who was looking at me with a mixture of fear and confusion. The dinner was delicious, Darnell, I said, even though I had not taken a single bite. But I think I have lost my appetite. I expect the paperwork for your company to be ready tomorrow. Do not make me wait. I walked out of the dining room, leaving them standing in the silence. Behind me, I heard Bradley cursing, trying to scrub the black ink off his skin. He did not know it yet, but that ink was the least of his problems. He had just marked himself, and M.J. Stone never missed a target. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Darnell's office, but it brought no warmth. The air was thick with the smell of stale coffee and panic. Darnell sat behind his mahogany desk, his hands trembling as he held the phone to his ear. On the other end of the line was Mr. Hirsch, the attorney representing the mysterious billionaire M.J. Stone. Just 12 hours ago, Darnell and Sloan had been popping champagne celebrating the sale of the logistics company that would save them from bankruptcy. They had spent money they did not have yet, booking first-class tickets to Paris and putting a deposit on a new Porsche. Now the walls were closing in. "Mr. Freeman, are you listening to me?" Hirsch's voice cut through the silence like a scalpel. "I said the deal is on hold, indefinitely." Darnell swallowed hard, his throat dry. "But why?" Mr. Stone agreed to the price. We shook hands. The paperwork was supposed to be a formality. "It is a formality," Hirsch replied, his tone bored and professional, "but a necessary one. Our audit team found a discrepancy in the founding charter of Freeman Logistics. You are listed as the CEO Darnell, but you are not the sole owner. According to the incorporation documents filed 30 years ago, 51% of the voting shares still belong to the founder, Montgomery Freeman." Darnell felt the blood drain from his face. He looked across the desk at Sloan, who was filing her nails waiting for the good news. She saw his expression and stopped, her eyes narrowing. "That is impossible," Darnell stammered into the phone. "My father, he retired 15 years ago. He walked away. He left everything to me." "He may have walked away physically," Hirsch said, "but legally his name is still on the deed. He never signed over the majority shares. Without his signature, you cannot sell this company. You cannot even sell a single truck. You do not own it, Mr. Freeman. You are just managing it for your father." Sloan stood up, sensing the disaster. She snatched the phone from Darnell's hand. "Listen here," she snapped. "This is ridiculous. The old man is gone. We have been running this business for over a decade. He has nothing to do with it. We can sign an affidavit. We can—" Mrs. Freeman Hirsch interrupted, his voice dropping an octave, becoming colder. "Mr. Stone is not interested in affidavits. He buys assets with clean titles. You have 24 hours to produce Montgomery Freeman and get his signature on a transfer of ownership. If you do not, Mr. Stone will pull his offer, and he will also call in the bridge loan he extended to you last night, which, if I recall correctly, would bankrupt you immediately. Good day." The line went dead. Sloan stared at the phone as if it were a venomous snake before slamming it down onto the desk. The crack of the plastic was the only sound in the room for a long moment. Then the explosion happened. "You idiot!" Sloan screamed, throwing a stapler across the room. It hit the wall with a dull thud. "You told me you handled this. You told me 15 years ago that you handled it. That—" Darnell put his head in his hands. "I thought I did," he moaned. "I thought the papers we made him sign were for the transfer." Sloan marched around the desk and grabbed Darnell by the lapels of his expensive suit, shaking him. "You thought— You never think, Darnell. That is your problem. We made him sign a power of attorney, a temporary power of attorney, so we could refinance the house. Do you not remember? We tricked him into thinking it was for his medical insurance." "I remember," Darnell whispered, shame coloring his voice. "God, he trusted us. He just signed it without reading because his glasses were broken. And you were supposed to use that to transfer the shares," Sloan hissed, letting go of him with a shove. "But you were too lazy. You were too busy playing big shot CEO to file the paperwork. And now that power of attorney is expired. It has been dead for years, just like our bank account is about to be." She began to pace the office, her heels digging into the carpet. "This is a disaster. We are sitting on a gold mine, and the only person who has the key is the man we threw into the garbage. Do you have any idea where he is?" Darnell shook his head. "No, I haven't spoken to him since the day we changed the locks." Sloan let out a bitter, cruel laugh. "Oh, that was a great day, wasn't it? I remember how he stood there on the porch knocking. He knocked for an hour. He just wanted his coat. And we sat inside and turned up the TV. We thought we were so smart. We thought we were finally free of his embarrassing stories and his blue-collar smell. Who knew the old fool was sitting on the controlling interest of the company?" She stopped pacing and looked at Darnell with eyes full of calculation. "We have to find him." "How?" Darnell asked. "He could be dead for all we know." "He is not dead," Sloan said. "Bad pennies always turn up. And besides, if he were dead, the state would have notified us. He is out there somewhere, probably living in some cheap motel or a shelter. He is a survivor. That is the annoying thing about him. He refuses to just disappear. She grabbed her purse and pulled out her phone. I am calling that private investigator, the one Bradley used to spy on his ex-girlfriend. He is expensive, Darnell said weakly. We are desperate, Sloane shot back. She dialed the number, tapping her foot impatiently. Listen to me, Darnell. When we find him, you are going to put on the performance of your life. You are going to be the prodigal son. You are going to cry. You are going to beg for forgiveness. You are going to tell him you miss him so much it hurts. I do miss him, Darnell said softly, almost to himself. Sometimes. Sloane glared at him. Save it for the old man. We do not need real emotions. We need a signature. Once he signs that paper, he can go back to being a ghost. We just need him to exist for 5 minutes. She put the phone to her ear. Hello, Mr. Vance. Yes, it is Sloane Freeman. I have a job for you. It is a missing persons case. No, not a child, an old man, my father-in-law. We are very worried about him. We just want to bring him home. She paused, listening, and then a twisted smile appeared on her face. Oh, do not worry about the cost. Just find him. He is an African-American male, 68 years old, last seen wearing rags and driving a truck. He answers to the name Monty. While Sloane barked orders at the investigator, describing Monty as if he were a runaway dog miles away in a high-rise penthouse, the real Montgomery Freeman sat in a leather armchair. I was watching them. On the large 4K monitor mounted on my wall, I had a clear view of Darnell's office. I had installed the hidden cameras inside the smoke detectors months ago, anticipating this very moment. I took a sip of my espresso, the bitter taste grounding me. I watched Sloane describing me as senile and pathetic. I watched Darnell crumbling under her pressure, admitting that he had tricked me 15 years ago. I remembered that day. I remembered signing the papers because Darnell told me they were for a better health plan. I remembered thinking my son was finally looking out for me. I did not know I was signing away my rights to my own home. But I had never signed away the company. That was the one thing I had kept safe, locked away in a safe deposit box they knew nothing about. I knew Darnell was lazy. I knew he would never do the due diligence, and that laziness was now the noose around his neck. I watched Sloane hang up the phone, looking triumphant. He is on it, she told Darnell. He says he can track him through his old Social Security number. If he has used a credit card or a bank account in the last decade, Vance will find him. I smiled, a cold, humorless expression that did not reach my eyes. They were looking for Montgomery Freeman. They were looking for a man who bought groceries with food stamps and lived in the shadows. They would never find him because he did not exist anymore. But I would let them think they found him. I picked up my phone and dialed a number. It was a burner phone I kept for this specific purpose. Hello, I said, changing my voice to sound raspy and weak. Is this the landlord of the Shady Pines Motel? I asked. Yes, who is this? This is Monty, I wheezed. I know I am late on the rent. Please do not throw my things out. My son is going to come for me. He is a big businessman. He will pay you. Just tell him I am there. I hung up. The bait was set. I had just planted the lead that the private investigator would find within the hour. I looked back at the screen. Sloane was hugging Darnell, telling him that everything would be fine, that they would get the signature, and then dump the old man back in the gutter where he belonged. Come and get me, children, I whispered to the screen. Come and find your father. But be careful what you wish for. You are not bringing home a victim. You are bringing home your judgment day. While Darnell and Sloane were frantically hiring private investigators to hunt down a ghost, my daughter Tanisha decided to take a different approach. She has always been the type of person who believes she is smarter than everyone else in the room, despite having never worked a hard day in her life. She remembered an old address I had sent her in a Christmas card 3 years ago. It was the only card that had not been returned to sender, mostly because she had forgotten to mail it back. She assumed that was where I was living, in squalor. I sat at my penthouse, adjusting the volume on my tablet. I had planted a small battery-operated camera in that apartment weeks ago. It was a single room in a dilapidated building on the south side of the city, a place I had rented specifically to stage this scene. I had filled it with moth-eaten clothes, empty cans of beans, and a mattress that smelled of mildew. It was the perfect stage set for the tragedy of Montgomery Freeman the failure. On the screen, I watched Tanisha kick the door open. She was wearing a beige trench coat that probably cost more than the entire building and heels that were sinking into the grime of the hallway floor. She covered her nose with a silk scarf, looking around with pure disgust. "Oh God," she muttered, her voice tinny through the microphone. "It smells like dead rats and poverty in here. I cannot believe we share DNA." She began to rifle through the room, using the tip of her umbrella to move piles of old newspapers. She was looking for financial documents, bank statements, anything that would tell her if the old man had any hidden value before Darnell got to him. She did not care if I was hungry. She did not care if I was cold. She only cared if I was solvent. She checked the drawers. Empty. She checked the closet. Just old work shirts. She was about to leave, frustrated, when she saw it. I had placed it carefully under the mattress, just visible enough to catch the eye. A thick yellowed envelope. She pulled it out, dusting off the grime. On the front, in my handwriting, I had written, "To be opened only in the event of my death." I watched her eyes widen. She looked at the door to make sure no one was watching. Then she looked at the envelope. A moral person would have respected the seal. A loving daughter would have cried. Tanisha ripped it open with her teeth. Inside was a handwritten letter. I recited the words in my head as she read them out loud, her voice trembling with excitement. "To whoever finds this," I wrote, "I have lived a simple life, but I was not a foolish man. I did not trust banks, and I did not trust the government. Over 40 years of driving trucks, I collected something better than cash. Gold. I buried it in a secure location, waiting for the day I could share it with someone who truly cared for me. If you are reading this, I am gone. The coordinates below will lead you to my life savings. Do not tell a soul." Tanisha gasped. She dropped the envelope and clutched the letter to her chest. Gold. She whispered the word like it was a prayer. Her phone began to ring. I zoomed in on the screen. It was Darnell. She stared at the phone. I could see the gears turning in her head. If she told Darnell, she would have to split the gold. She would have to share it with Sloan, whom she hated, and Bradley, whom she despised. Darnell was the golden boy. He always got everything. This was her chance to finally be the rich one. This was her chance to flip the power dynamic. She swiped to answer the call, putting on her best fake voice. "Hey, Darnell," she said, sounding bored. "No, I am at the spa. Why would I be looking for him? Sloan is crazy." "Look, I have to go. My masseuse is waiting." She hung up. She lied to her own brother without blinking an eye. A cold smile spread across her face as she looked at the coordinates at the bottom of the letter. "Jackpot," she whispered. I took a sip of my tea. The coordinates did not lead to a bank vault. They led to the city's industrial waste management facility. Specifically, to a decommissioned sludge tank that I had legally purchased for scrap metal 2 weeks prior. Tanisha wasted no time. She ran out of the apartment, clutching the letter like a winning lottery ticket. I switched the camera feed to the GPS tracker I had placed on her car. She was speeding. She was breaking every traffic law in Atlanta to get to her treasure. It took her 45 minutes to reach the outskirts of the city. The landscape changed from skyscrapers to warehouses and rusted fences. The sun was setting, casting long, ugly shadows over the industrial park. Tanisha pulled her luxury SUV up to the chained gate of the facility. She got out looking confused. She checked the paper, then her phone's GPS. This was the place. She probably thought I had buried the gold here years ago before it became a dump. Greed has a way of making people rationalize the irrational. She saw a hole in the chain-link fence. Without hesitation, she squeezed through, tearing the sleeve of her expensive coat. She did not care. She marched through the mud, ruining her heels. I switched to the camera I had installed on the perimeter fence of the facility. I watched her stumbling over piles of scrap metal, following the numbers. She stopped in front of a large rusted metal container that was sunk into the ground. It looked like a bunker. To a desperate mind, it looked like a vault. There was a heavy lid on top. Tanisha threw her umbrella down and grabbed the handle with both hands. She grunted, straining against the rust. "Come on," she hissed. "Come on, give it to Papa!" With a final ear-splitting screech of metal, the lid gave way. It swung open, revealing the dark abyss below. Tanisha leaned over, using her phone flashlight to peer into the darkness. She was expecting the glitter of gold bars. She was expecting a vintage trunk filled with coins. Instead, the ground beneath her feet, which I had carefully weakened, gave way. She screamed as she slid forward. It wasn't a long fall, maybe 5 feet, but it was messy. She landed with a wet, squelching thud at the bottom of the tank. It was not filled with gold. It was filled with rainwater mud and the remnants of industrial runoff. It was a thick black sludge that smelled of sulfur and rotten eggs. I watched her thrash around the black goo, coating her designer coat, her hair, and her face. She tried to stand up, but the bottom was slippery and she fell face first into the muck again. She sat up, spitting out sludge, wiping her eyes. Her phone had flown out of her hand and was sinking slowly into the mire. "Daddy," she shrieked, her voice echoing in the empty tank. "Daddy, help me!" Then she saw it. Floating on a piece of styrofoam in the corner of the tank was a small laminated note. She crawled over to it, her knees squishing in the filth. She picked it up with trembling, blackened fingers. I had written it in big, bold letters. "The only thing buried here is your dignity. Welcome to the real world, sweetheart." She stared at the note. She looked up at the sky visible through the open lid. She screamed. It was a primal scream of rage and humiliation. She realized she had been played. She realized that someone knew exactly how greedy she was, but she did not know who. Was it a rival? Was it Darnell playing a prank? Or was it the ghost of the father she had abandoned? I turned off the monitor. My daughter was sitting in a pit of filth exactly where her morals belonged. She would survive. She would climb out eventually, but the smell of that sludge would linger on her skin for weeks, and the memory of her own greed would haunt her forever. "One down," I whispered to the empty room. 3 to go. I traded my $5,000 Italian suit for a pair of stained overalls that smelled of diesel and old sweat. I rubbed dirt under my fingernails and messed up my hair until I looked exactly like what my children expected me to be. A failure, a burden, a ghost from a past they were desperate to forget. I stood on the porch of the mansion that my son Darnell had bought with the profits from the company I built. My heart was pounding, not from fear but from a cold, simmering rage. I raised my hand and rang the doorbell. Inside I could hear laughter. I could hear the clinking of crystal glasses. They were celebrating the deal they thought they had made with MJ Stone. They were celebrating the sale of my legacy. The door swung open. Sloane stood there holding a glass of champagne. Her smile vanished the instant she saw me. Her face twisted into a mask of absolute disgust. She stepped back as if I were a carrier of a contagious disease. "Excuse me," she snapped, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "We do not give handouts here. The shelter is 5 miles down the road. Please get off my property before I call the private security patrol." I did not move. I just looked at her. I looked past her shoulder to where Darnell was walking into the hallway, curious about who was at the door. "Sloane, who is it?" Darnell asked. "Is it the sushi delivery?" "No," Sloane yelled, waving her hand in front of her nose. "It is a vagrant. He smells terrible. I am calling the police." Darnell stepped into the light. He looked at me. He squinted his eyes. For a moment there was nothing but confusion. And then I saw the recognition hit him like a physical blow. His face went pale. He dropped the napkin he was holding. "Dad," he whispered. Sloane froze. She looked at Darnell, then back at me. Her eyes widened. She scanned my dirty clothes, my worn-out boots, the plastic bag I was clutching in my hand. "That is your father?" she asked, incredulity dripping from every word. "This person." "Hello, Darnell," I said, making my voice sound weak and rasping. "I have been walking for a long time. I saw the lights. I wanted to see you." Sloane was about to slam the door in my face. I could see her muscles tensing to push the wood shut. She did not care if I was his father. She wanted me gone. But Darnell grabbed her wrist. He pulled her close and whispered something in her ear. I knew exactly what he was saying. He was telling her that I was the key. He was telling her that without the man standing in the dirt, their entire world would collapse. "We need his signature," Darnell hissed. Sloane stopped. She blinked. And then I witnessed the most terrifying performance I have ever seen in my life. The disgust on her face vanished. It was replaced instantly by a look of exaggerated concern. Her lips curled up into a smile that looked painful. Her eyes softened, though the calculation behind them remained cold and hard. "Oh my goodness," she cried out, her voice pitching up 2 octaves. "Dad, is that really you?" She rushed forward. She did not hug me. She stopped just inches away, careful not to let my dirty clothes touch her white silk dress. But she clasped her hands over her chest as if she were overcome with emotion. "Darnell, do not just stand there," she scolded her husband. "Help your father inside. Look at him. He is exhausted." "Oh, you poor, poor man. Where have you been all these years?" Darnell looked stunned by his wife's sudden transformation, but he played along. He stepped out and took my arm. His grip was tentative. He was touching me like I was fragile or perhaps like I was dirty. "Come in, Dad," Darnell said. "Come inside." I walked into the foyer, the same foyer where just days ago I had walked in as a billionaire. Now I shuffled my feet. I let my shoulders slump. I looked down at the marble floor. "I am sorry," I mumbled. "I'm getting dirt on your nice floor." "Oh, nonsense," Sloane trilled, closing the door behind us. "Floors can be cleaned. Family is forever. We have been so worried about you, Monty." "Can I call you Monty?" "We looked everywhere. We hired investigators. We prayed every night that you would come back to us." I looked at her. She was lying with such ease that it was almost impressive. Just 10 minutes ago she had been calling me a bad penny. Now I was the answer to her prayers. "You did?" I asked, widening my eyes innocently. "But I called. I called so many times. The number was changed. I came here, but the security guard chased me away." Sloane let out a dramatic gasp. She turned to Darnell. "Did you hear that, honey? The security guard chased him away. That is unacceptable. We will have that man fired immediately. There must have been a terrible misunderstanding. We never changed our number, Dad. You must have been dialing the wrong one. You know how phone lines get crossed." She guided me into the living room, but not to the white sofas. She steered me toward a wooden chair in the corner far away from the expensive fabrics. "Sit here," she said. "Darnell, get your father some water, and maybe some bread. He looks like he hasn't eaten in weeks." She stood over me, her hands on her hips, beaming with fake benevolence. "I am just so glad you are here," she said. "It is divine timing, really. We were just talking about you. Darnell misses you so much. He talks about you every day. He always says, 'I wish my dad could see how well I am doing with his company.'" She emphasized the word company. She was planting the seed. She was rushing straight to the point. "The company," I repeated, staring blankly. Is it doing okay? I worry about the trucks." "Oh, it is doing better than okay," Sloane gushed. "It is thriving. Darnell is a genius. But you know there are so many boring administrative things to take care of, just paperwork. In fact, there is a tiny little document we need you to look at, just to make sure everything is safe for your legacy." She looked at Darnell, who was returning with a glass of tap water. "Get the papers, Darnell," she mouthed silently. Darnell looked at me. "Dad," he said, "it is great to see you. But Sloane is right. We have some business to handle. Since you are here, maybe we can just get it out of the way. Then you can relax." I took the water. My hand shook, intentionally spilling a little on my pants. I saw Sloane flinch, her nose wrinkling in distaste before she forced the smile back onto her face. "I am so tired," I whispered. "I have not slept in a bed for 3 days. Can I rest first? Before we talk about business." Sloane's smile faltered. She exchanged a look with Darnell. They needed that signature tonight. Mr. Hirsch had given them 24 hours. "Of course you can rest," Sloane said, her voice tight. "But this will only take a second. Just one signature. Right here." She grabbed a folder from the table and thrust a pen at me. "Just sign here," she said, pointing to the line. I squinted at the paper. The words were blurring. "I do not have my glasses," I said. "I lost them in the shelter. I cannot sign what I cannot read. I promised Lucille I would never sign anything I did not read." At the mention of my dead wife, Darnell looked away. Sloane, however, looked ready to scream. She took a deep breath, composing herself. "Okay," she said. "Okay, that is fine. We will get you some reading glasses tomorrow. We will go to the pharmacy first thing in the morning." She pulled the paper away. "So tonight you will rest, and tomorrow we will sort everything out. Because we are a family, and families help each other." I looked around the room. "Where are the children?" I asked. "Where are my grandchildren? I have not seen them since they were babies." Sloane stiffened. "Oh, the kids. Yes, they are away. At boarding school, in Switzerland. Very prestigious. They are studying French. They won't be back for months." I knew my grandchildren were upstairs playing video games. I had seen their bicycles in the garage when I walked up the driveway. But I nodded. "Switzerland," I said. "That sounds expensive." "It is," Sloane said quickly. "That is why the business is so important. For their future. You want to help your grandchildren, don't you, Monty?" "Yes," I said. "I want to help them." "Good," she said. "Then tomorrow you will sign. Now let us get you to bed." She looked at Darnell. "Where should he sleep?" Darnell asked. "The guest room is made up." No, Sloane interrupted instantly. Not the guest room. We have guests coming this weekend. Important investors. We cannot have the room occupied. She turned to me. We have a very cozy room downstairs, Monty. It is private, very quiet. You will love it. She led me not to a bedroom, but to the back of the house, past the kitchen, to a small door that led to the storage area. It was a room meant for a live-in maid, or perhaps just for storing winter coats. It was small, windowless, and smelled of cleaning supplies. There was a single cot in the corner and a stack of cardboard boxes labeled Christmas decorations. This is perfect, Sloane said, flicking on the single bare bulb that hung from the ceiling. You will be safe here. No one will bother you. I looked at the cot. It had no sheets, just a bare mattress. Thank you, I said. It is better than the park bench. Sloane stood in the doorway. She did not step inside. I will bring you some blankets, she said. And Monty, about your stay. Yes, I asked. Darnell and I discussed it. She lied. We would love for you to stay, for a while, maybe a month, until you get back on your feet. We cannot have you running off again, especially not before, well, we just want you close. She wanted me close so she could control me. She wanted me in a cage until the check cleared. A month, I asked. You would let me stay for a month? Absolutely, she said. But we have some rules, just simple house rules. I waited. We entertain a lot of high-profile people, she said, like Mr. Stone. You remember him, the billionaire. He might be coming by. So when we have guests, you need to stay in here, or use the back entrance. We do not want to overwhelm you. And honestly, your appearance might confuse people. We have not told anyone you are back yet. We want to keep it a family surprise. She meant she was ashamed of me. She meant she did not want her rich friends to know that the father-in-law she claimed was dead was actually sleeping next to her vacuum cleaner. I understand, I said. I will be invisible. Good, she said. Good. She turned to leave, but stopped. Oh, and Monty. That smell. I looked down at my clothes. We will burn those clothes tomorrow, she said. I will get Darnell to give you some of his old gardening things. We cannot have that smell in the house. It lingers. She closed the door. I heard the lock click. Not a heavy lock, just a privacy lock, but the message was clear. I was not a guest. I was a prisoner. I sat down on the bare mattress. The room was cold. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator through the wall. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my smartphone, the one piece of technology I had hidden from them. I opened the app that connected to the cameras in the house. I saw Sloane and Darnell in the kitchen. Sloane was washing her hands, scrubbing them furiously as if she had touched toxic waste. Can you believe the timing she was saying to Darnell? It is a miracle. A smelly, disgusting miracle. He looks bad, Sloane, Darnell said. He looks really sick. Who cares? Sloane snapped. He is breathing, and his hand can hold a pen. That is all we need. Tomorrow morning we get the signature. By noon we sell the company to Stone, and by dinner we drop the old man off at a nursing home. I am not keeping him here a month. I just said that to keep him calm. I watched Darnell nod. He did not argue. He opened a bottle of wine and poured himself a glass. I turned off the phone. I laid back on the hard mattress. They thought they had trapped me. They thought they had a month to manipulate me. But they were wrong. I had given them a month. Not for me to recover, but for them to suffer. I closed my eyes and listened to the silence of the storage room. It was the silence before the storm. Tomorrow the games would truly begin, and I would make sure that every single day of this next month would feel like a year of torture for them. They wanted to hide me in the dark. Fine, but they forgot one thing. The dark is where I do my best work. The first week of my imprisonment in the storage room was a masterclass in dehumanization. Sloane did not beat me with a stick, for that would leave marks, and she was far too concerned with appearances. Instead, she beat me with rules. The first rule was about food. I was not allowed to eat at the dining table, nor was I allowed to eat when they were eating. Sloane claimed it was because my cough was unappetizing, but I knew the truth. She did not want to look at the man she was exploiting. Every evening after they had finished their steak or lobster, Darnell would bring me a paper plate. It was never a full meal. It was the scraps, the gristle from the steak, the cold mashed potatoes that had hardened on the serving spoon, the ends of the bread loaf that no one wanted. One evening, Darnell handed me a bowl of lukewarm soup. He refused to look me in the eye. "I am sorry, Dad," he mumbled. Sloan says we are out of fresh bowls. The dishwasher is running. I looked at the soup. It was clearly the dregs from the pot watered down to make it look like a full serving. I took it without complaint. "Thank you, son," I said. "I am just grateful to be inside." The second rule was about hygiene. I was forbidden from using the guest bathroom on the main floor. Sloan told me that the plumbing was delicate and could not handle the kind of toilet paper I would likely use. It was an absurd lie. The real reason was that she did not want my poverty touching her porcelain. I was forced to use the utility sink in the garage to wash my face and a rusted toilet in the pool house, which required me to walk outside in the cold rain to relieve myself. But the worst torture came from Bradley. My son-in-law seemed to derive a sick pleasure from my presence. He would come down to the storage room when Sloan was out shopping, leaning against the doorframe with a smug grin on his face. "You know, Monty," he said one afternoon, kicking at the box of Christmas decorations next to my cot, "it is actually pathetic that you ended up like this. Darnell told me you used to run a whole fleet of trucks. What happened? Did you drink it all away? Or were you just too stupid to manage your money?" I sat on the edge of my cot staring at my hands. I kept my head down, playing the part of the broken old man. I was never good with numbers, I whispered. I trusted the wrong people. "Yeah, well, that is obvious," Bradley laughed. He took a sip of his energy drink and then deliberately dropped the empty can on the floor of my room. "Oops, my bad. You can pick that up, right? Since you are basically the janitor around here anyway." He walked away whistling. I stared at the can. It was a small indignity, but it burned hotter than fire. I wanted to stand up, put on my suit, and destroy his life right then and there. But I waited. The signature was scheduled for the end of the month. I had to endure. I became a ghost in that house. I learned to walk without making a sound. I learned to breathe shallowly so they would not hear me. And in my silence, I became the most dangerous thing in their lives. An observer. They thought I was sleeping or staring at the wall, but I was working. Every time they left a room, I was there. I was gathering ammunition. My primary target was biological evidence. I had a theory about my grandson, the boy they claimed was at boarding school, but who was actually hidden upstairs playing video games all day to avoid seeing me. I had seen Sloan and Bradley exchange looks that were too intimate for in-laws. I had seen the way Bradley ruffled the boy's hair with a possessiveness that Darnell never showed. One morning, while everyone was out, I crept upstairs. The house was silent. I went into the bathroom shared by Sloan and Bradley. I found a hairbrush on the counter. It was full of dark, coarse hair, Bradley's hair. I carefully removed a few strands and placed them in a small plastic bag I had stolen from the kitchen. Then I went to the boy's room. He was not there, likely out with the nanny. I found his baseball cap on the bed. Inside, I found what I needed, a single strand of hair. I bagged it. I hid the bags inside the lining of my old boot. Science would soon prove what my instincts already knew. But I did not stop there. I needed their words. I needed them to hang themselves. I kept my smartphone recording at all times. I hid it in the pocket of my overalls, the microphone facing out. I caught conversations that made my stomach turn. I recorded Sloan in the kitchen talking to her friend on the phone. "Oh, it is a nightmare, Jessica," she said, sipping wine. "The old man smells like a wet dog, but we are almost done. As soon as the ink is dry on that transfer, I am driving him to the state border and dumping him. I do not care what Darnell says. I am not changing adult diapers for a man who did not leave us a dime." I recorded Darnell and Bradley in the living room watching football. "You sure this MJ Stone guy is legit?" Darnell asked. "He is loaded," Bradley replied. "I saw his watch. That thing costs more than your life. Once we get the money, Darnell, you need to ditch the old man. Seriously, he is bringing down the vibe. If Stone sees him, he might pull the deal." "I know," Darnell said. I feel bad. He is my dad." "Don't be a wuss," Bradley snapped. "He is a liability. You want the Ferrari or not?" I saved every file, every insult, every plot. They were digging their own graves with their tongues, and I was just holding the shovel. By the third week, my patience was wearing thin. The humiliation was constant, and I needed to release some pressure. I needed to remind them that actions have consequences even if they did not know the source. I decided to target the thing Sloan loved more than her husband or her child, her wine collection. Sloan prided herself on her wine cellar. It was a glass-encased room off the kitchen filled with bottles that cost thousands of dollars. She did not drink them often. She just liked to show them off to guests. It was a symbol of the status she felt she deserved. I knew that the climate control system for the cellar was located in a small utility panel in the hallway near my storage room. I had watched the repairman service it a year ago on the security cameras I monitored. Late one night after the house had gone dark, I slipped out of my room. I used a butter knife to pry open the panel. Inside was a digital thermostat. It was set to a perfect 55 degrees Fahrenheit, the ideal temperature for preserving vintage wine. I looked at the blue numbers glowing in the dark. I thought about the cold soup they fed me. I thought about the unheated storage room where I slept. I thought about how cold their hearts were. I pressed the button. 60, 70, 80. I cranked it all the way up to 90 degrees. Then I switched the fan setting from auto to high. I closed the panel and went back to bed. The next morning the house was peaceful. I was sweeping the kitchen floor, part of the chores Sloan had assigned me to earn my keep. Sloan walked in looking refreshed, ready to host a brunch for her garden club. "I am going to open a bottle of the 1990 Bordeaux," she announced to Darnell. "It will impress the girls." She walked to the glass door of the cellar. She paused. She frowned. "Why is the glass foggy?" she muttered. She opened the door. A blast of hot air hit her in the face. It smelled like cooked vinegar and spoiled grapes. "What the hell?" she shrieked. She ran inside. I heard the sound of a bottle popping. The heat had expanded the liquid inside, pushing the corks out. Another pop, and another. It sounded like gunfire. "My wine!" Sloan screamed, her voice tearing through the house. "Oh my God, my wine! It is boiling!" Darnell came running in. "What happened?" "The cooling unit," Sloan wailed, holding a hot, sticky bottle of what used to be a $5,000 investment. "It is blowing hot air. It is ruined. Everything is ruined." She spun around, her eyes wild. She saw me standing there with the broom, looking confused and frightened. "You!" she screamed, pointing a finger at me. "Did you touch the thermostat?" I shrank back, clutching the broom. "Thermostat?" I asked, my voice trembling. "I do not know what that is, Miss Sloan. I was just sweeping." "Is that the thing with the numbers? I thought it was a radio. I tried to turn it down because it was humming." Sloan looked like she was going to have a stroke. Her face turned a violent shade of red. She raised the bottle as if she were going to strike me. "You stupid, senile old fool," she roared. "You just destroyed $50,000 worth of wine." Darnell grabbed her arm. "Sloan, stop. He does not know. He is old." "I do not care," she screamed, struggling against him. "I want him out. Get him out of my house. Now." She was hyperventilating. She wanted to throw me onto the street. I waited, my heart pounding. If she kicked me out now, the plan would fail. I needed the signature. But then greed kicked in. I saw the realization wash over her face. If she kicked me out, she lost the deal with MJ Stone. If she kicked me out, she lost the millions. The wine was gone, but the big prize was still within reach. She lowered the bottle. She took jagged breaths. She looked at me with pure hatred. "Get out of my sight," she hissed. "Go to your room. If I see you before the signing tomorrow, I will kill you myself." I nodded rapidly, bowing my head. "I am sorry, Miss Sloan. I am so sorry." I scuttled back to my storage room. Once the door was closed and locked, I sat on my cot. I listened to her sobbing in the kitchen, mourning her spoiled alcohol. I allowed myself a small smile. The wine was ruined, but the victory tasted sweet. Tomorrow was the signing. Tomorrow the heat would really get turned up, and this time there would be no cooling unit to save them. The morning of the signing arrived with a heavy gray sky that seemed to press down on the roof of the mansion. Inside, the air was crackling with a frantic energy. Sloan was running around barking orders at the cleaning staff, ensuring every surface gleamed for the notary's arrival. Darnell was pacing in the living room, rehearsing his victory speech, adjusting his tie in the mirror every 30 seconds. I sat in the corner on a wooden stool, wearing the gardening clothes they had given me. I looked like a scarecrow in a palace, invisible and unwanted. This was it, the final hour. But before I let the guillotine fall, I had to offer my son one last chance to save himself. One last opportunity to prove that there was still a human heart beating beneath that expensive suit. "Darnell," I said softly. He did not turn around. He kept fixing his cufflinks. "What is it, Dad?" "We are busy. The notary will be here in 20 minutes. I looked at the calendar on the wall. "Today is the 14th, I said. "Do you know what day that is?" Darnell sighed, a sound of pure irritation. "Yes, Dad. It is the day we sell the company. It is the day we finally get rich. Can you please focus?" I gripped my knees. No, Darnell. I mean, do you remember what happened on this day 15 years ago? He stopped moving. He looked at me in the mirror, his brow furrowed. 15 years ago. I do not know. Was that the year we bought the boat? My heart shattered into 1,000 pieces. It was not anger I felt, but a profound sorrow. It was the day your mother died. Darnell, I whispered. It was the day Lucille passed away in her sleep. You were supposed to come to the hospital. You never showed up because you had a golf tournament. Darnell turned around, then his face flushing red. Not with shame, but with defensiveness. Oh, for God's sake, he snapped. Why do you always have to bring that up? Why do you have to be so morbid? I was busy, Dad. I was building a career. Mom would have wanted me to be successful, not sitting around crying in a hospital room. Stop trying to guilt trip me. It is ancient history. Ancient history. The woman who birthed him. The woman who worked double shifts to buy him his first computer. She was just a calendar date he could not be bothered to remember. I looked at him, and for the first time I did not see my son. I saw a stranger. I saw a hollow shell of a man filled with greed and excuses. I understand, I said, my voice devoid of emotion. I won't bring it up again. Good, Darnell said, turning back to the mirror. Let us keep the vibes positive today. This is a celebration. Just then, Sloane swept into the room. She was wearing a cream-colored silk dress that probably cost more than my first house. She held a tray with a crystal pitcher of iced tea and 3 glasses. She was smiling, but her eyes were cold and predatory. Okay, everyone, she announced. The notary is parking his car. Monty, get up. Stand by the table. And for heaven's sake, try not to look so pathetic. We need this to go smoothly. I stood up slowly. My joints ached from sleeping on the cot, but I forced myself to move. As I walked toward the table, my foot caught on the edge of the thick rug. I stumbled. It was an accident. A moment of genuine clumsiness from an old man. I reached out to steady myself, but my hand hit the tray Sloane was holding. The pitcher wobbled. It tipped. In slow motion, I watched the dark amber liquid splash out. It did not hit the floor. It hit Sloane. The cold tea soaked into the front of her cream silk dress, instantly turning it a muddy brown. The ice cubes clattered onto the marble floor. Silence. Absolute, terrified silence. Sloane looked down at her dress. Then she looked up at me, her face contorted into a mask of pure, unadulterated hatred. The veneer of the polite society wife vanished. The monster revealed itself. "You filthy animal!" she shrieked. Before I could apologize, before I could even take a breath, her hand flew out. Smack! The sound of her palm hitting my cheek echoed through the large room like a gunshot. My head snapped to the side, my glasses flew off my face and skittered across the floor. My cheek burned with a sharp, stinging pain. I stood there stunned. I touched my face. My daughter-in-law had just slapped me. "I look at you and I want to vomit," she screamed, shaking with rage. "You ruin everything. You come into my house with your smell and your poverty and you ruin everything. Look at this dress. Do you have any idea how much this cost? You could work for 100 years and never afford a single button on this dress." She was panting, her chest heaving. She looked ready to strike me again. I slowly turned my head to look at Darnell. He was standing 5 feet away. He had watched the whole thing. He had seen his wife assault his 68-year-old father. "Darnell," I said. He looked at me. Then he looked at Sloane. He saw her rage. He saw the power she held over him. He saw the money she represented. He looked down at his shoes. "You should have been more careful, Dad," he mumbled. "Sloane is under a lot of stress. You know how much she loves that dress. That was the moment. That was the death of my fatherhood. I did not yell. I did not fight back. I simply bent down, picked up my glasses, and put them back on my face. One of the lenses was cracked. It was fitting. The way I saw them was now permanently broken. "Give me the paper," I said. Sloane stopped screaming. She blinked, surprised by my sudden calm. What she asked. "The paper," I repeated. "The transfer document. Give it to me. I want to sign." Sloane's eyes lit up. She forgot about the dress. She forgot about her anger. She grabbed the folder from the table and thrust it at me. She shoved a pen into my hand. "Here," she said, breathless. "Right here. Sign it and you can go. We will get you a taxi. Just sign it." I took the pen. It was a cheap ballpoint, not the gold fountain pen I used as MJ Stone. I looked at the document. It was a total transfer of ownership of Freeman Logistics to Darnell Freeman. It was the theft of my life's work. I pressed the pen to the paper. My hand did not shake. I signed my name clearly. Montgomery Freeman. I put the pen down. "Is it done?" Darnell asked, stepping forward, his eyes hungry. I looked at him. I looked at the red mark on my cheek reflecting in his eyes. "It is finished," I said. They thought I meant the deal. They thought I meant the transfer. They did not know I was quoting the end of their lives as they knew it. I turned to the door. "Wait," Sloane said, clutching the folder to her chest like a prize. "Where are you going?" "The notary needs to notarize this." "I am leaving," I said, walking toward the front door. "You have what you wanted. You have the company. You have the house. You have everything." "But the taxi," Darnell called out. "We have not called a taxi." "I do not need a taxi," I said, opening the heavy wooden door. The cool night air hit my face, soothing the burn on my cheek. I walked out onto the porch. I walked down the long driveway. I did not look back at the mansion. I did not look back at the son who let me be slapped. I did not look back at the daughter-in-law who saw me as in stain on her dress. I reached the main road. A black limousine pulled up to the curb. The window rolled down. It was Mr. Hirsch. "Get in, Monty," he said softly. I opened the door and slid into the leather seat. The smell of clean leather and expensive cologne filled my nose. I took off the dirty gardening jacket and threw it on the floor. Hirsch handed me a wet towel. I wiped the dirt from my face. I wiped the spot where she had slapped me. "Did they sign?" Hirsch asked. I nodded. "They have the paper." "They think they won." Hirsch handed me a glass of whiskey. "And the notary." I took a sip of the burning liquid. "The notary is on his way. He will certify the signature. And the moment he stamps that paper, the trap is sprung." "Why?" Hirsch asked. "Because I said, staring out the window at the city lights. Montgomery Freeman signed that paper. But Montgomery Freeman does not own the company anymore. MJ Stone does. They just transferred a shell, an empty box. And in doing so, they triggered the fraud clause in the contract I had them sign yesterday as Stone." I leaned back, closing my eyes. "They slapped a father," I whispered. "But they just declared war on a billionaire. Drive, Hirsch. Let us go home. I have a funeral to plan." "Whose funeral?" Hirsch asked. "Theirs," I said. The car sped off into the night, leaving the Freeman mansion behind. Inside that house, they were popping champagne, celebrating their victory. They did not know that the ink on that paper was not a ticket to paradise. It was a death warrant for their greed. And tomorrow the executioner would come knocking. The elevator doors to the penthouse office of Stone Holdings opened with a soft chime that sounded like the bell at the start of a boxing match. Darnell and Sloane stepped out looking like royalty. Sloane had replaced her tea-stained dress with a sharp navy business suit that screamed authority. Darnell was carrying a leather briefcase, gripping the handle so tightly his knuckles were white. I was sitting in my high-back leather chair, facing the window looking out over the Atlanta skyline. I did not turn around when they entered. I wanted them to feel the weight of the room. I wanted them to feel small before I crushed them. Mr. Stone Darnell called out, his voice filled with a confidence that he had not earned. "We have it. The deal is done." I spun the chair around slowly. I was wearing my tinted glasses and the tailored suit of MJ Stone. I rested my elbows on the desk and steepled my fingers. "You are early," I said, my voice low and gravelly. "We are eager," Sloane interjected, stepping past Darnell to place a blue folder on my desk. "We do not like to waste time, Mr. Stone. We have the signature. Montgomery Freeman has signed over full control of the logistics fleet to Darnell. It is all here, notarized and ready for your countersign." She looked at me with a triumphant smirk. She thought she had won. She thought she had successfully bullied an old man into submission and was now about to cash out. She had no idea that she had just hand-delivered the final nail in her husband's coffin. I did not reach for the folder immediately. I let it sit there between us. The silence stretched out, uncomfortable and heavy. Darnell shifted his weight, loosening his tie. Sloane tapped her foot. "Is there a problem?" Sloane asked, her smile faltering slightly. I looked at my lawyer, Mr. Hirsch, who was standing quietly in the corner of the room holding a tablet. "Check the document." "Hirsch," I said. Hirsch stepped forward. He put on his reading glasses and opened the blue folder. He scanned the paper. He looked at the signature, he looked at the notary stamp, then he closed the folder and pushed it back toward Darnell. "I am afraid we cannot accept this," Hirsch said calmly. Darnell's face went pale. "What do you mean you cannot accept it? It is valid. It is his signature." I watched him sign it. The notary was there. Hirsch shook his head. "The signature is physically real, Mr. Freeman. I do not doubt that your father held the pen. But legally this document is worthless. In fact, it is worse than worthless. It is a confession." Sloan slammed her hand on the desk. "Stop playing games. We have a deal. You said if we got the signature you would buy the company for $10 million. We held up our end. Now write the check." I stood up then. I leaned over the desk, invading their space. "We cannot buy a company from a ghost." "Mrs. Freeman," I said. "What are you talking about?" Darnell whispered. Hirsch projected a document onto the large screen behind me. It was a court order dated 2 months ago. "Please look at the screen," Hirsch said. 2 months ago, the individual known as Montgomery Freeman filed a petition with the Superior Court. He legally changed his name. He also dissolved his previous legal identity for all business purposes. The man you knew as Montgomery Freeman does not exist in the eyes of the law. His assets were transferred to a blind trust. Darnell squinted at the screen. He read the text. Then he looked at me. His eyes widened behind his glasses. "Wait," Darnell stammered. "If he changed his name, then who is—" Hirsch clicked a button. A new image appeared. It was a copy of my new driver's license. The face was mine. The name next to it read M.J. Stone. Darnell stopped breathing. He looked from the screen to me and then back to the screen. The realization hit him like a freight train. He did not recognize me as his father because of the disguise and the context, but he recognized the legal reality. "You," Darnell gasped, "you own the trust. I own everything, Darnell," I said, dropping the raspy voice I used as the old man. "I own the logistics company. I own the house you sleep in. I own the debt you racked up. And the signature you just brought me. That is a signature from a legal entity that no longer has authority. You tried to sell my own company back to me using a dead name." Sloan looked confused. She was not as quick as Darnell when it came to the legal details, but she understood the tone. "I do not understand," she screeched. "Who cares what his name is? We have the company. Darnell is the CEO. No, Hirsch interrupted. Darnell is the acting manager. And by presenting this document, Darnell has just attempted to sell assets he does not own using a fraudulent chain of title. He knowingly coerced a signature from a person he believed to be mentally incompetent based on your own claims to the private investigator to execute a sale for personal gain." Hirsch paused for effect. "That is called corporate fraud, Mrs. Freeman. And since the value of the transaction exceeds $1 million, it is a federal crime." Darnell backed away, shaking his head. No, this is a trap. You set us up." "I did not set you up, son," I said, cold and hard. "You set yourself up the moment you decided your father was nothing more than a signature to be harvested. I gave you a chance. I asked you if you remembered your mother. I asked you to treat me with dignity. And you let your wife slap me." Sloane's mouth fell open. She stared at me, really stared at me. She looked at the expensive suit, the tinted glasses, the gold watch. And then she saw the eyes, the same eyes she had looked into yesterday when she struck me. "It is you," she whispered. "You are—" "I am the man who cleans up the trash," I said. "And I am starting right now." I pressed a button on my desk. The double doors to the office flew open. They did not send security guards. They sent the Economic Crimes Unit. 4 officers in tactical vests marched into the room. They were not smiling. They had been waiting in the hallway for 10 minutes, listening to everything via the speakerphone I had left open. Darnell Freeman, the lead officer, shouted, "Put your hands behind your back. You are under arrest for attempted grand larceny, securities fraud, and elder abuse." Darnell tried to run. It was a pathetic attempt. He took 2 steps toward the side door before an officer tackled him to the plush carpet. The sound of his expensive suit tearing was music to my ears. Sloan screamed. She backed into the corner, holding her hands up. "I did not do anything," she wailed. "It was him. It was all Darnell. He made me do it. I just wanted to sell the house. I did not know about the company. I am a victim here. I watched her throw her husband to the wolves without a second of hesitation. It was exactly what I expected." "Officer," I said, pointing at Sloan. You might want to check her purse. I believe you will find a cell phone containing text messages conspiring to commit fraud, and perhaps a receipt for a private investigator hired to harass a senior citizen." The officer nodded. "Ma'am, turn around." "No," Sloane shrieked as the officer grabbed her wrists. "Do you know who I am? I am a member of the country club. You cannot touch me." The click of the handcuffs was the only answer she got. Darnell was hauled to his feet. His nose was bleeding from hitting the floor. He looked at me, tears streaming down his face. "Dad," he sobbed. "Dad, please, tell them. Tell them it is a mistake. I am your son." I walked around the desk. I stood right in front of him. I looked him in the eye just as I had done when he was a boy and had broken a window. But this time I did not have a baseball glove to fix it. "My son died 15 years ago," I said softly. "I do not know who you are. But you are certainly not a Freeman, because a Freeman never betrays his own blood. Take him away," I told the officer. Darnell screamed as they dragged him out. "Dad, Daddy, please." I watched them go. I watched Sloane kicking and spitting at the officers, her dignity completely gone. The elevator doors closed, cutting off their screams. The office was quiet again. Hirsch adjusted his glasses and picked up the blue folder. "That went well," Hirsch said. I walked back to the window. I looked down at the street below. I could see the flashing lights of the police cars. I could see my son being shoved into the back of a squad car. "It is not over, Hirsch," I said. "This was just the arrest. Now comes the trial. Sloane will fight. She will try to say I am insane. She will try to say I manipulated them." Hirsch smiled. "Let her try. We have the video of the slap. We have the recordings from the house. We have the DNA evidence from the hairbrush." I nodded. "Yes, we have everything. But I want more than just a conviction, Hirsch. I want to destroy the lie they have been living. I want the world to see them for what they really are." I turned back to the room. "Prepare the press release," I said. "MJ Stone is suing for custody of the company. And, add a personal note, MJ Stone is also suing for a paternity test regarding the grandchild." Hirsch looked surprised. "You want to go there already?" "I want to burn it all down," I said. "If I am going to build a new legacy, I need to clear the land first, and that means digging up every single root." I picked up the picture frame on my desk. It was a photo of Lucille. "I told you I would fix it, Lucy," I whispered to the photo. "I am cleaning the house." I put the photo down. The war was far from over. Darnell was in a cell, but Sloane was a survivor. She would find a lawyer. She would find a way to spin this. I needed to be ready for the next round. And the next round would be in the courtroom, where the truth is the only weapon that matters. The courtroom smelled of floor wax and desperate lies. It was a smell I had grown accustomed to over the last 40 years of business, but today it hung heavier in the air. I sat in the back of the room, hidden behind a tall oak pillar, waiting for my cue. Darnell and Sloane were already seated at the plaintiff's table. Darnell looked like a man who had not slept in a week. His skin was gray, his eyes bloodshot, and he kept wringing his hands together as if trying to wash off an invisible stain. Sloane, on the other hand, was dressed for war. She wore a modest black dress and a string of pearls, the perfect costume for the grieving, concerned daughter-in-law. She was whispering furiously to her lawyer, a shark of a man named Mr. Gentry, who was known for tearing families apart for a retainer fee. The bailiff called the court to order. Judge Harris, a stern man with a reputation for zero tolerance for nonsense, took the bench. He adjusted his glasses and looked down at the docket. "Case number 405, he read. "The estate of Montgomery Freeman versus M.J. Stone and Associates, regarding the competency and guardianship of Montgomery Freeman." That was my cue. Mr. Hirsch, my attorney, stood up. "Your Honor, the defense is present, and we would like to introduce the respondent, Mr. Montgomery Freeman, also known legally as M.J. Stone." The double doors at the back of the courtroom swung open. I did not walk in with the shuffle of an old broken man. I did not wear the stained overalls or the cracked glasses. I walked in with the stride of a man who owned the building. I was wearing a charcoal gray three-piece suit that cost more than Darnell's car. My shoes were polished to a mirror shine. My head was held high and my eyes were hidden behind my signature-tinted aviator glasses. The sound of my footsteps on the marble floor was the only noise in the room. Click, click, click. I walked past the gallery. I walked past the bailiff. I walked right up to the defense table and stood next to Hirsch. I slowly took off my glasses and folded them into my pocket. I turned my head and looked directly at Darnell. The color drained from Darnell's face so fast I thought he might faint. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He was looking at his father, but he was seeing a stranger. He was seeing the power I had always possessed, but had hidden to protect them. Sloane gasped. She clutched her pearls, her eyes darting from my face to my suit. She recognized the suit. It was the same one I had worn at the auction. The realization hit her like a physical slap. The billionaire investor and the beggar father were the same person. Order Judge Harris banged his gavel, silencing the murmurs in the crowd. Mr. Freeman, please take your seat. I sat down, crossing my legs and adjusting my cuffs. I looked calm, but inside my heart was racing. This was the first round, and I knew Sloane well enough to know she would not go down without a dirty fight. Your Honor, Mr. Gentry began standing up and smoothing his tie. He had a voice like oil poured over gravel. We are here today because my clients, Mr. and Mrs. Freeman, are deeply concerned for the well-being of their father. We believe that the man sitting across from us is suffering from a severe mental decline. We believe he is experiencing a dissociative fugue state, creating this persona of M.J. Stone as a coping mechanism for his senility. Objection, Hirsch said calmly. My client is perfectly sane. Is he? Gentry shot back. Your Honor, we have evidence. Irrefutable video evidence that just days ago, this man was wandering the streets, eating out of garbage cans and sleeping in a storage closet. We believe he is a danger to himself and others, and we are petitioning the court to grant immediate emergency guardianship of his person and his assets to his son, Darnell Freeman. I tightened my jaw. This was their angle. They wanted to paint me as crazy so they could annul the sale, take control of my money, and lock me away in a facility where I could never speak again. Proceed with your evidence, Judge Harris said. Gentry nodded to his assistant. The lights in the courtroom dimmed. A large screen descended from the ceiling. I watched as the video began to play. It was footage from the security cameras inside Darnell's house. But it was edited. Heavily edited. On the screen, I saw myself in the dirty overalls. I was sitting on the floor of the kitchen eating the scraps they had given me. But Gentry had cut out the part where Darnell handed me the plate. It just looked like I was scavenging food off the floor like an animal. Next, a clip of me wandering into the wine cellar. They cut out the part where the cooling unit malfunctioned. It just looked like I walked in and started smashing bottles in a rage. I looked deranged, swinging the broom, my face contorted in fear. Then the clip of me sleeping in the storage room. I was curled up on the bare mattress talking to myself. In reality, I was recording my notes for the lawsuit, but without the audio context, I looked like I was having a conversation with invisible demons. The video ended. The lights came back up. The silence in the courtroom was heavy. Judge Harris looked at me. His expression was no longer neutral. It was pitying. And pity is the most dangerous emotion in a courtroom, Mr. Freeman, the judge asked. Is that you in the video? I stood up. Yes, Your Honor. That is me. And can you explain why a billionaire CEO was sleeping in a storage closet and eating scraps, the judge asked. Because my children put me there, I said, my voice steady. Objection, Gentry shouted. The witness is paranoid. Your Honor, my client, Sloane Freeman, tried to help him. She tried to bathe him. She tried to feed him. But he refused. He insisted on sleeping in that room. He insisted on wearing those rags. It is part of his illness. Sloane stood up then. She wiped a fake tear from her eye. It is true, Your Honor, she sobbed. Her performance was Oscar-worthy. We love him so much. It broke my heart to see him like that. We tried to get him to see a doctor, but he got violent. He started talking about conspiracies and changing his name. We just want to protect him. Please, let us take care of him. We are the only family he has. I looked at her. She was crying crocodile tears, begging the court to give her the keys to the kingdom she had just tried to steal. Judge Harris looked at Darnell. Mr. Freeman, do you agree with your wife's statement? Darnell looked at me. I saw the conflict in his eyes. He knew it was a lie. He knew I was sane, but he also knew that if he admitted the truth, he was going to prison for fraud. Self-preservation won. Yes, Your Honor, Darnell whispered, looking down. My father. He is not himself. He needs help. The judge nodded slowly. He leaned back in his chair, tapping his pen on the bench. "This is a compelling argument," Judge Harris said. "The behavior in that video is disturbing. Mr. Freeman, you may be well dressed today, but mental illness can be volatile. I have a duty to protect vulnerable seniors from their own delusions." I felt a cold drop of sweat slide down my back. The trap was backfiring. I had played the role of the victim so well that I had convinced the judge I was actually a victim. If he granted them guardianship even temporarily, they could freeze my accounts. They could block my lawsuit. They could win. Hirsch leaned over to me. "We are losing him," he whispered. "We need to escalate." "I know," I whispered back. Judge Harris cleared his throat. "Based on the evidence presented, I am inclined to grant a temporary emergency guardianship to Darnell Freeman pending a full psychiatric evaluation of Mr. Montgomery Freeman." Sloan let out a small gasp of relief. A smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. She thought she had done it. She thought she had outsmarted M.J. Stone. "Wait, Your Honor," I said, my voice booming across the room. Judge Harris frowned. "Mr. Freeman, sit down. I am making my ruling." "I will not sit down," I said, "because you have not seen all the evidence. You have seen the movie they directed. But you have not heard the soundtrack." Mr. Freeman Gentry interrupted. "Stop this outburst. This is exactly the kind of erratic behavior we are talking about." I ignored him. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small black USB drive. "Your Honor," I said, "that video was silent for a reason. Because if you heard what they were saying to me, you would not send me to a hospital. You would send them to jail." I held up the drive. "I have audio recordings of every single moment in that house," I said. "I have recordings of Sloan Freeman admitting she wanted to dump me at a shelter. I have recordings of Darnell Freeman conspiring to defraud M.J. Stone. And most importantly, I have a recording of what happened 5 minutes before that video of me eating scraps was taken." Sloan's face went white. She stopped crying instantly. I turned to Hirsch. "Play it." Hirsch plugged the drive into his laptop. He connected it to the court's audio system. Judge Harris looked intrigued. "I will allow it," he said. Gentry tried to object. "Your Honor, this is inadmissible. We do not know the source of these recordings." "It is my phone," I said. "The phone I kept in my pocket while your client treated me like a dog." Hirsch pressed play. The sound of Sloan's voice filled the courtroom. It was loud, clear, and undeniably her. "I do not care what Darnell says the recording played. I am not changing adult diapers for a man who did not leave us a dime. As soon as the ink is dry, I am driving him to the state border and dumping him." The courtroom gasped. Then Bradley's voice. "He is a liability. You want the Ferrari or not." Then Darnell's voice. "I know. I just feel bad. But we need the money." I looked at the judge. His face had hardened. The pity was gone. It was replaced by disgust. Sloan was shaking her head frantically. "That is not real. That is AI. He faked it." I signaled Hirsch to play the next file. It was the sound of a slap, a sharp cracking sound, and then Sloan's voice screaming, "You filthy animal! You ruin everything! Look at this dress." I touched my cheek. "Is that AI Mrs. Freeman?" I asked. "Or is that the sound of a loving daughter-in-law taking care of a senile old man?" Judge Harris looked at Sloan. "Mrs. Freeman, sit down," he barked. He turned to me. "Mr. Freeman, do you have more of these?" "I have 48 hours of audio." "Your Honor," I said. "And I also have something else. Something that proves that the deception in this family goes far deeper than just money." I looked at the back of the courtroom. The doors opened again. A young man walked in. He was tall, handsome, with intelligent eyes. He was carrying a DNA testing kit box. It was Tevin, my protege. "Your Honor," I continued, "my children claim they want to protect the family legacy, but I would like to introduce the court to the only person in this room who actually understands what family means. And while he is here, I would like to submit one final piece of evidence into the record. A hair sample." Sloan stood up, knocking her chair over. "No." "You cannot." "Sit down," the bailiff shouted, moving toward her. I picked up the plastic bag from the evidence table. "This is a hair sample from my grandson," I said. "And this is a hair sample from my son-in-law, Bradley." Darnell looked at Sloan. He looked at Bradley, who was sitting in the gallery trying to shrink into his seat. "What is he talking about?" Darnell asked, his voice trembling. I looked at Darnell with genuine sadness. "I am talking about why your son has blue eyes, Darnell. I am talking about why your wife and your brother-in-law always seem to have private jokes. I am talking about the truth that is going to hurt more than losing the money." Judge Harris leaned forward. "Mr. Freeman, are you suggesting—" "I am not suggesting, Your Honor. I am proving." The courtroom was silent. The air was thick with the impending explosion. I had stopped their attack, but now I was about to drop the bomb that would leave nothing but craters where their lives used to be. The air in the courtroom had shifted from tense to toxic. My revelation about the paternity test hung over the room like a dark cloud, silencing the murmurs of the gallery. Darnell was staring at his wife with a look of dawning horror, and Sloane was gripping the edge of the table so hard her knuckles were white. But before the judge could even process the implication of the DNA evidence, a new player entered the arena. My daughter Tanisha stood up from the bench behind the defense table. She had been quiet until now, watching the proceedings with calculating eyes. She saw the ship was sinking. She saw the audio recordings destroying her brother's credibility. She saw the paternity test destroying her sister-in-law's marriage. And Tanisha, true to her nature, decided that loyalty was a luxury she could not afford. She was a survivor, or so she told herself. In reality, she was a vulture, looking for the last scrap of meat on the bone. "Your Honor," Tanisha announced, her voice trembling with practiced fragility. "May I approach the bench? I have information that is vital to this case." Sloane whipped her head around. "Tanisha, sit down," she hissed. "What are you doing?" "I am doing the right thing," Tanisha said loudly, making sure the judge heard her. "I cannot sit here and listen to these lies anymore." Judge Harris looked at Tanisha. He adjusted his glasses. "You are the daughter, are you not?" "Tanisha Freeman." "Yes, Your Honor," Tanisha said, walking past the wooden gate. She did not look at Darnell or Sloane. She looked directly at me. Her eyes were wide and pleading. She was trying to silently communicate with me. She was trying to say, "Look, Daddy, I am on your side. Please do not cut me out of the will." I watched her with a stone-cold expression. I knew exactly what she was doing. "State your piece, Ms. Freeman," the judge said. Tanisha took a deep breath. She gripped the railing of the witness stand, though she had not been sworn in. "My brother and his wife are lying," she said, her voice gaining strength. "They forced me to go along with this. They told me that if I did not help them declare our father incompetent, they would cut me off financially. I never wanted to do it. I love my father. I know he is sane. I know he is MJ Stone." "Liar," Darnell screamed, jumping to his feet. "You were the one who went to the dump to find his gold. You were the one who told us to sell his organs if he died." Order, the bailiff shouted, moving toward Darnell. "It is true," Tanisha cried out, drowning out her brother. "Darnell and Sloane planned everything. They hired the private investigator. They set up the meeting. They even joked about poisoning his food to speed up the process. I was terrified of them, Your Honor. I am just a victim here. Please, you have to believe me. I beg the court to protect my father from these monsters." Sloane stood up, her face twisted in fury. "You little snake," she screeched. "You were begging for a cut of the money yesterday. You told me to push him down the stairs if he refused to sign." The courtroom erupted into chaos. It was a spectacle of absolute moral decay. Brother turned against sister. Wife turned against husband. They were tearing each other apart, revealing the ugly, rotting core of their relationships. They were not a family. They were a pack of rabid dogs fighting over a carcass. And now that the carcass had stood up and bitten back, they were turning on each other. I sat there calm and unmoving. I did not need to say a word. They were doing my work for me. I watched Tanisha sobbing fake tears, pointing an accusing finger at Sloane. I watched Darnell shouting profanities at his own sister. This was the legacy I had unknowingly built by spoiling them. This was the fruit of my leniency. "Enough," Judge Harris roared, slamming his gavel down with such force that it sounded like a gunshot. The room fell silent instantly. Darnell sank back into his chair, panting. Sloane looked like she wanted to murder someone. Tanisha stood there, looking at the judge with wide, innocent eyes, hoping her betrayal had bought her a ticket to salvation. "Ms. Freeman, take your seat," the judge ordered, his voice dripping with disdain. "Your statement is noted, but do not think for a second that throwing your family under the bus absolves you of your own complicity." Tanisha's face fell. She walked back to the gallery alone. She looked at me again, but I looked away. "There is no redemption for a rat who only jumps ship when the water rises." Judge Harris turned his gaze to the defense table. "Mr. Gentry," he said to their lawyer, "your clients seem to be having a breakdown in unity. Do you have any actual evidence to support your claim that Mr. Montgomery Freeman is mentally incompetent, or are we done with this circus? Gentry looked defeated. He wiped sweat from his forehead. Your Honor, we stand by the video evidence submitted earlier. The plaintiff's behavior was erratic. Erratic, I spoke up then. My voice was calm, contrasting with the hysteria of my children. You call it erratic. I call it survival. Your Honor, my daughter just testified that there was a plot to harm me. My son just admitted they were looking for my gold. But words can be retracted. Lies can be spun. I prefer to deal in absolutes. I nodded to Mr. Hirsch. We have one final piece of evidence, Your Honor, Hirsch said. The defense showed you a video that was edited to tell a lie. We would like to show you the raw footage, the unedited truth of what happened inside that house, specifically the events of yesterday morning, the events that led to my client leaving the premises. I object, Gentry said weakly. We have not reviewed this footage, overruled Judge Harris snapped. If your clients have nothing to hide, they should not be afraid of a movie night. Play the tape. Hirsch connected his laptop to the court system again. The large screen flickered to life. The image was crisp and clear. It was a high-definition, wide-angle shot of the living room in the Freeman mansion. The timestamp in the corner read 8:15 a.m. On the screen, I was standing by the table looking old and frail in my gardening clothes. Darnell was fixing his tie in the mirror. Sloan was holding the pitcher of iced tea. The audio was crystal clear. Do you remember what happened on this day 15 years ago? My voice on the screen asked. Then Darnell's voice. Why do you have to be so morbid? I was busy, Dad. The courtroom watched in silence. They saw the disrespect. They heard the callousness. But that was just the warm-up. Then came the stumble. On the screen, I tripped. The pitcher tipped. The tea splashed onto Sloan's dress. The reaction was visceral. The entire courtroom watched as Sloan's face transformed into a mask of pure evil. They heard her scream, "You filthy animal!" And then they saw it. The slap was even more shocking on the big screen. Sloan's hand connected with my face with a brutal force. My head snapped back. My glasses flew across the room. A collective gasp went through the gallery. Several jurors put their hands over their mouths. Even the bailiff looked away, disgusted. But the video did not stop there. It continued. It showed Darnell standing there watching his wife assault his father. It showed me looking at him pleading silently for help, and it showed Darnell looking down at his shoes saying, "You should have been more careful, Dad. Sloan is under a lot of stress." The video ended. Hirsch froze the frame on the image of me standing with a red mark on my face, looking completely alone in a house full of enemies. I looked at the judge. His face was red with suppressed anger. He was gripping his gavel so hard his knuckles were white. He looked at Sloan not as a judge looks at a litigant, but as a human being looks at a monster. Sloan was staring at the table. She could not look up. She knew there was no coming back from this. There was no spin. There was no excuse. She had been exposed as an abuser in high definition. Mr. Gentry, Judge Harris said, his voice dangerously low. Do you have any explanation for why your client just assaulted a senior citizen in what appears to be an unprovoked attack? Gentry stood up, but he had nothing. He stammered. Your Honor, it was a reflex. The tea was cold. It was shock. It was assault, the judge barked. And it was elder abuse. And the fact that her husband stood there and watched it happen makes him an accessory. He turned to Darnell. Mr. Freeman, you petitioned this court to give you guardianship over your father because you claimed he was unable to care for himself. You claimed you wanted to protect him. Is slapping him across the face your definition of protection? Is forcing him to sleep in a storage closet your definition of care? Darnell was shaking. He was crying real tears now, tears of terror. I am sorry, he sobbed. I am sorry. Judge Harris stood up. He did not need to hear any more. I have heard enough, he announced. This petition is not only dismissed, it is offensive to this court. He looked at me. Mr. Montgomery Freeman, please stand. I stood up. Sir, the judge said, his tone respectful. It is the opinion of this court that you are not only of sound mind, but you are perhaps the most lucid person in this room. You have demonstrated incredible restraint in the face of horrific treatment. The court recognizes your identity as M.J. Stone and affirms your full legal control over your assets, your person, and your decisions. Thank you. Your Honor, I said, bowing my head slightly. The judge turned back to the defense table. He pointed his gavel at them like a weapon. As for you three, he said, including Tanisha in his glare, you should be ashamed. You came here seeking control over a man you clearly despise. You wasted the court's time with fraudulent claims and manipulated evidence. Judge Harris turned to the bailiff. Bailiff, please take that video file into evidence. I am forwarding a copy of this hearing's transcript and the video evidence to the district attorney's office. I am recommending immediate criminal charges be filed against Sloan Freeman for assault and battery on an elderly person. I am also recommending an investigation into Darnell Freeman for conspiracy to commit fraud and elder neglect. Sloan screamed, "No, you cannot do this. I have children." "Not anymore," I said quietly. The judge continued. "The petition for guardianship is denied with prejudice. This means you can never file it again. Furthermore, I am issuing an immediate restraining order. Darnell Freeman, Sloan Freeman, and Tanisha Freeman are to stay 500 yards away from Mr. Montgomery Freeman at all times. If you violate this, you will go straight to jail without bail." Judge Harris slammed the gavel down one last time. "Case closed. Get them out of my sight." The courtroom erupted. Reporters were running to the doors. Police officers were moving toward the defense table. Sloan was hyperventilating. Darnell was sobbing into his hands. Tanisha was trying to sneak out the side door, but a deputy blocked her path. I stood there in the center of the storm, perfectly still. I adjusted my cuffs. I put my tinted glasses back on. Hirsch began to pack up his briefcase. "Congratulations, Mr. Stone," Hirsch said. "You won." I looked at my children being handcuffed. I looked at the family that was now completely destroyed. "I did not win, Hirsch," I said, my voice heavy. "I just stopped losing." I turned and walked out of the courtroom. The heavy doors closed behind me, shutting out the sound of their wailing. I walked down the long marble hallway, my footsteps echoing in the silence. I was free. I was vindicated. But as I walked out into the bright sunlight of the afternoon, I did not feel joy. I felt the cold, hard weight of the truth. I was a billionaire. I was a genius. But I was also a father who had just orphaned himself. And that was a grief that no amount of money could ever cure. The fallout from the courtroom was swift and brutal. In the age of the internet, justice moves faster than the speed of light, and my children were about to learn that bad news travels quickly. Within 2 hours of the judge banging his gavel, the video of Sloan slapping me had been uploaded to every major social media platform. It had millions of views. The title was simply, "The Ungrateful Daughter-in-Law." Sloan tried to return to her life as if nothing had happened. She drove straight from the courthouse to her luxury real estate brokerage in Buckhead. She thought she could spin the narrative. She thought she could tell her boss that it was a deep fake or a misunderstanding. But when she swiped her key card at the glass entrance, the light turned red. She tried again, red. Her boss, a woman named Catherine, who had tolerated Sloan's arrogance only because she brought in sales, walked to the door. She did not open it. She simply taped a piece of paper to the glass. It was a termination notice. Sloan started banging on the door, screaming that she was a top producer. Catherine just pointed to her phone, mouthing the words, "We saw the video." Sloan turned around to see her coworkers staring at her through the glass. They were not looking at her with envy anymore. They were looking at her with the same disgust she had shown me when I wore my gardening clothes. Her phone buzzed. It was an email from the Atlanta Women's Charity League. Her membership had been revoked, effective immediately. The social ladder she had spent 15 years climbing had just collapsed, and she was free falling into social oblivion. Meanwhile, Bradley was facing a different kind of terror. The startup investors he had bragged about to me were not legitimate venture capitalists. They were loan sharks operating out of a strip mall in Decatur. Bradley had borrowed $50,000 from them to fund his lifestyle while waiting for my money to come through. He had promised them a double return by Friday. I watched through the GPS tracker on his car as he drove frantically around the city. He stopped at 3 different banks trying to get a cash advance. Every card was declined. My legal team had already frozen Darnell's assets, and since Bradley and Sloan's finances were entangled with Darnell's, they were locked out of everything. Bradley's phone rang. I could hear the conversation through the bug in his car. A deep voice on the other end said simply, "Time is up, Bradley. We are coming for the car, and maybe a few fingers." Bradley threw the phone out the window and sped off, weeping like a child. He was discovering that the street justice he had mocked me for was very real, and it did not care about his polo shirt or his golf handicap. By the next morning, the destruction had reached the foundation. Darnell had managed to post bail using a bondsman, leveraging the last piece of jewelry Sloan had not pawned. He returned to the mansion hoping to regroup and formulate a plan. He thought he still had the house. He thought he still had a roof over his head. But when he pulled into the driveway, he saw the flashing blue lights of the sheriff's department. 2 moving trucks were already parked on the lawn. Men in uniforms were carrying out the Italian leather sofa. They were carrying out the 85-inch television. They were emptying the house. Darnell ran out of his car screaming, "What are you doing? You cannot do this. I own this house." The sheriff, a large man who had clearly seen the viral video, stepped in front of him. He did not look amused. "Mr. Freeman," he said, handing Darnell a thick packet of papers. "We are executing a foreclosure order. This property has been seized." "Foreclosure," Darnell stammered. "That is impossible. The mortgage is paid. I pay it every month." "You missed the last 3 payments," the sheriff said. "But that is not why we are here. The bank sold the note on this house 6 months ago. The new note holder called in the debt immediately upon the trigger of a criminal investigation clause in your contract." Darnell looked at the paper. His eyes scanned the legal jargon until they landed on the name of the new note holder. Stone Holdings, LLC. Darnell dropped the paper. He fell to his knees on the manicured grass. It was not a bank. It was me. I had bought the mortgage on his house the same week I returned to Atlanta. I knew Darnell was over-leveraged. I knew he was living paycheck to paycheck to maintain appearances. I had held the note waiting for the perfect moment to pull the rug out. And now, as he watched his life being carried out in cardboard boxes, he realized the extent of my control. He looked up at the bedroom window. Sloane was leaning out, screaming at the movers not to touch her furs. She looked deranged. Her hair was unwashed, her makeup smeared. Sloane. Darnell yelled, "Get out. It is over. Dad owns the house." Sloane froze. She looked down at Darnell. Then she looked at the paper on the grass. She let out a scream of pure frustration and slammed the window shut. But 5 minutes later, a deputy escorted her out the front door. She was holding a single Louis Vuitton bag, clutching it like a life preserver. The neighbors were watching. The same neighbors Sloane had tried to impress with her parties and her lies. They stood on their porches, phones out, recording the downfall of the Freemans. Sloane tried to hide her face, but there was nowhere to hide. The spotlight she had always craved was finally on her, and it was burning her alive. Night fell, and the temperature dropped. The Freeman family sat in Darnell's luxury SUV parked in the lot of a 24-hour gas station. It was the only place they could go. Their credit cards were frozen. Their friends had blocked their numbers. The hotels required a deposit they could not pay. Sloane sat in the passenger seat, staring blankly out the window. Bradley was in the back, twitching every time a car drove by, terrified it was the loan sharks. Darnell gripped the steering wheel, his head resting on his hands. Tanisha was not with them. She had tried to go to a friend's house only to be turned away at the door. She was currently sleeping in her car a few miles away. "We have nothing," Sloane whispered. Her voice was hoarse from screaming. "No house, no money, no friends." Darnell lifted his head. "We have the car," he said weakly. "We can sleep here tonight." "For how long?" Darnell Sloane snapped. "Until we run out of gas. Until they repossess this too. We are homeless. Do you understand? We are the people we used to laugh at." Bradley kicked the back of the seat. "This is your fault, Darnell. If you had just handled the old man better, we would be rich right now. You were too soft." "Shut up," Bradley, Darnell shouted. "You were the one who wanted the Ferrari. You were the one who mocked him." They sat in silence for a long time, the smell of gasoline and desperation filling the car. They were hungry, they were cold, and they were terrified. Then Darnell spoke. The words were quiet, but they carried the weight of inevitable defeat. "We have to go to him." Sloane whipped her head around. "No, never. I will starve before I ask that man for help." "We are starving!" Sloane. Darnell yelled. "Look at us. We are sitting in a gas station. We are going to prison. He is the only one who can stop this. He is my father. Somewhere deep down, he still loves me. He has to. He hates you," Bradley muttered. "He destroyed us." "He taught us a lesson," Darnell said, trying to convince himself. "Maybe that is all this was. A lesson. Maybe if we go to him, if we apologize, really apologize, he will call off the dogs. He just wants respect. We can give him respect." Sloane laughed bitterly. "You think he wants respect? He wants blood." "We have no choice," Darnell said, starting the engine. "I know where his office is. I know where MJ Stone lives. We are going there. And we are not leaving until he sees us." Darnell pulled out of the gas station. He drove toward the city skyline, toward the penthouse where I sat waiting. He thought he was going to beg for mercy. He thought he could appeal to the father he had buried. But he was wrong. He was driving toward a man who had already grieved the loss of his children. He was driving toward a mirror that would show him exactly who he was. I watched their car moving on my tracker. I took a sip of whiskey. "Come on home, children," I whispered. "The lesson is not over yet. You have lost your things. Now it is time to lose your illusions." The visiting room of the Fulton County Jail was a place where hope went to die. The air smelled of industrial bleach and unwashed bodies. I sat on a metal stool that was bolted to the floor, staring at the thick plexiglass barrier that separated the free from the condemned. I checked my watch. It was a Patek Philippe heavy in gold on my wrist. I adjusted my silk cuffs and waited. On the other side of the glass, a heavy steel door buzzed open. 2 guards escorted a man in a bright orange jumpsuit into the room. It took me a moment to recognize him. Without his Italian suits, his expensive haircut, and his arrogance, Darnell looked small. He looked like a frightened child who had been caught stealing from the cookie jar, only now the jar was locked and he was trapped inside. He sat down, his chains rattling against the metal table. He picked up the black phone receiver with trembling hands. I picked up mine. "Dad," Darnell choked out. His voice was tinny through the receiver, cracking with emotion. "Dad, thank God you came. You have to get me out of here. It is a nightmare. The food is inedible. The other inmates, they look at me like I am prey. I cannot survive in here, Dad. I am not built for this." I looked at him. I looked at the dark circles under his eyes. I looked at the way his lip quivered. "You are built for whatever you create, Darnell," I said calmly. "You built this cell brick by brick. Every lie was a brick. Every stolen dollar was a brick. You constructed this reality for yourself. No." Darnell pleaded, leaning forward until his forehead touched the glass. "No, Dad. It was Sloan. I told you. She manipulated me. She controlled the finances. She made me sign those papers. I wanted to call you. I wanted to help you, but she threatened to take the kids. She threatened to divorce me. I was a hostage in my own home. Please, Dad, you have the money now. You are MJ Stone. You can post bail. You can hire the best lawyers. Just get me out and I swear I will sign everything over to you. I will work for you. I will drive trucks. Just please do not leave me here." I listened to him beg. I listened to him blame his wife. I listened to him try to bargain with a life he no longer owned. It was pathetic. But more than that, it was insulting. "I did not come here to bail you out, Darnell," I said, my voice cutting through his sobbing. "I came here to give you something you have owed me for 15 years. Darnell blinked, wiping tears from his face with his cuffed hands. "What? What do you mean?" "Money. Do you need money?" "I need your attention," I said. "For 15 years I have been invisible to you, but today you are going to look at me, you are going to listen to me, and you are not going to interrupt." Darnell fell silent. He sensed the shift in the atmosphere. He realized that the man on the other side of the glass was not the father he could manipulate. "You say you wanted to call me," I began. "You say you were a hostage. Let us look at the timeline, Darnell. Let us look at the receipts of your love." I pulled a small notebook from my pocket. I did not need to open it. I had memorized every entry. November 14th, 2010. I said, 2 years after your mother died, I was hospitalized with a severe lung infection from breathing diesel fumes for 30 years. I called you. I left 3 voicemails. I told you I was scared. I told you the doctors were worried. Do you know where you were? Darnell looked down. I do not remember. I do, I said. You were in Las Vegas. You posted photos of yourself at a poker table. You captioned it, "Living the Dream." While I was lying in a hospital bed wondering if I would ever breathe without a machine again, you were betting thousands of dollars on a hand of cards. You did not call me back for 3 weeks. And when you did, you asked if I could loan you money for a car repair. Darnell flinched, as if I had struck him. Christmas Eve, 2014. I continued. I drove 4 hours to your house. I brought a bicycle for my grandson. I parked in your driveway. I could see the lights on inside. I could see the Christmas tree. I rang the bell. Sloan looked out the window. She saw my truck. She closed the curtains. You texted me 10 minutes later. You said, "Sorry, Dad, we are not home. We are visiting Sloan's parents." I sat in my truck and watched you eat dinner through the window. I ate a cold sandwich from a gas station and drove home alone. "Dad, stop," Darnell whispered. "Please." I will not stop, I said, my voice rising slightly. July 4th, 2018. I lost my commercial driver's license because my eyesight was failing. It was the day I lost my livelihood. It was the day I became useless to the world. I came to your office. I asked you for a job. Any job. Dispatcher, janitor, anything. You laughed. You told your secretary to give me a $50 gift card to a grocery store and show me the door. You told me I was bad for the company image. I did not mean it, Darnell cried. I was stressed. The investors, I interrupted. You care more about the opinion of strangers than the survival of your own flesh and blood. You spent a decade building a reputation on a foundation of sand, Darnell. You pretended to be a self-made man, but you were standing on my back the whole time. And every time I tried to stand up, you kicked me down because you were afraid people would see how tall I really was. I leaned in closer to the glass. Do you know what hurts the most, Darnell? It is not the money. I can make more money. It is not the house. A house is just wood and stone. It is the silence. For 15 years, I waited for the phone to ring. Just once. I wanted you to call me not because you needed something, but because you wanted to hear my voice. I wanted you to ask me how I was doing. I wanted you to tell me about your day. But the phone only rang when you needed a signature, or a loan, or a scapegoat. Darnell was sobbing openly now, his shoulders shaking. I am sorry, Dad. I wasted it. I wasted all of it. I was blind. You were not blind, I said. You were indifferent. And indifference is a choice. You chose to forget me. You chose to erase me. And now the universe is granting your wish. What do you mean? Darnell asked, looking up with terror in his eyes. I mean that Montgomery Freeman is finally doing what you asked him to do, I said. He is disappearing. I stood up. I placed the receiver back on the hook, but I did not let go of it yet. You asked me to save you, Darnell, but I cannot save a man who is already dead. The son I loved died a long time ago. He died the day he let his wife slap his father and did nothing. The man sitting in front of me is just a stranger who shares my last name. And as of this morning, I have instructed my lawyers to legally disown you. You are no longer my heir. You are no longer my responsibility. Darnell slammed his hand against the glass. No, you cannot do this. You are my father. You have to help me. I will die in here. I looked at him with a cold, detached pity. Then learn to survive, I said. Like I did. When you threw me away, I found a way to rise. Now it is your turn. Find your own way, Darnell. Because M.J. Stone does not invest in bad stock. I hung up the phone. The sound of the click was final. It severed the last thread connecting us. Dad, Darnell screamed. His voice was muffled by the thick glass, but I could hear the desperation. Dad, come back. Do not leave me. I am sorry. I love you. I turned my back on him. I walked toward the steel door. I could hear him banging on the glass behind me. Thump, thump, thump. It sounded like a heartbeat fading away. I signaled the guard to open the door. Is he okay? The guard asked, looking at Darnell, who was sliding down the glass, weeping. He is exactly where he belongs, I said. I walked out of the visiting room and into the corridor. The heavy steel door slammed shut behind me, silencing Darnell's screams. I took a deep breath. The air in the hallway was still stale, but to me it smelled like freedom. I had carried the weight of my son's rejection for 15 years. It had bent my back and broken my heart. But today I had put that weight down. I had returned the burden to the person who created it. I walked out of the jail and into the bright Atlanta sunlight. Mr. Hirsch was waiting by the limousine. How did it go? Hirsch asked, opening the door for me. It is done, I said, sliding into the seat. The past is buried. Hirsch closed the door. Where to now, Mr. Stone? I looked at the city skyline. I looked at the future that was wide open and waiting for me. Take me to the office, Hirsch, I said. We have a company to run, and I have a grandson to meet. As the car pulled away, I did not look back at the jail. I did not mourn the man in the orange jumpsuit. I had shed my old skin, and with it my old pain. Montgomery Freeman was a memory. M.J. Stone was the reality, and M.J. Stone had work to do. The press conference was held in the atrium of the Stone Holdings Tower, a space of glass and steel that reached up toward the heavens like a cathedral of commerce. I stood at the podium looking out at a sea of reporters and flashing cameras. Next to me stood Tevin. He was 30 years old, wearing a suit that fit him perfectly, not because it was expensive, but because he carried himself with the dignity of a man who had earned his place. Tevin was the son of the nurse who had cared for me during my heart surgery 5 years ago. When my own children were too busy spending my money to visit me, Tevin had sat by my bedside reading me the newspaper and listening to my stories about the trucking industry. He did not know I was rich. He just thought I was a lonely old man who needed a friend. I had paid for his business school tuition anonymously and hired him as an intern under the name M.J. Stone. He had worked his way up from the mailroom to the boardroom, never once asking for a handout. I leaned into the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming today. For 40 years I have built this company with my own 2 hands. I have driven the trucks, I have loaded the pallets, and I have negotiated the deals. But a man cannot rule forever. There comes a time when he must pass the torch to the next generation. The reporters leaned in, expecting me to name Darnell. They did not know Darnell was currently sitting in a jail cell. They did not know the drama that had unfolded just hours before. I am proud to announce that effective immediately, the new Chief Executive Officer of Stone Holdings and the sole heir to the Freeman estate is Mr. Tevin Lewis. The room erupted in applause. Tevin stepped forward, humble and gracious, shaking my hand. He looked at me with tears in his eyes. "Thank you, sir," he whispered. "I will not let you down." "I know you won't, son," I said, "because you understand that value is created by hard work, not by birthright." As the applause washed over us, I looked through the glass walls of the atrium to the street outside. My security team had barred my biological family from entering the building, but they were there. Darnell had been released on bail just an hour ago and had come straight here desperate to stop the announcement. He was standing on the sidewalk, his clothes rumpled, his face pale, pressing his hands against the glass. Next to him stood Sloan and Bradley. They were screaming silently, their mouths contorted in rage. They were watching a stranger claim the throne they believed was their birthright. It was a scene of poetic justice. The people who had locked me out of my own home were now locked out of my legacy. I finished the press conference and walked out the side exit with Tevin and Mr. Hirsch. My security detail formed a ring around us, but there was no avoiding the confrontation. My children had run around the block to intercept us at the parking garage. Sloan was the first to reach me. She was holding my grandson Leo by the hand. The boy looked terrified, dragging his feet in his school uniform. Sloan shoved him toward me like a human shield. "You cannot do this, Monty," she screamed, her voice cracking with hysteria. "You cannot give our money to that nobody. Look at him. Look at your grandson. Are you going to let him starve? Are you going to let your own flesh and blood grow up on the street while you play daddy to this charity case?" I stopped. I signaled the security guards to stand down. I looked at little Leo. He had big, innocent eyes that were filled with confusion. He did not understand why his mother was screaming or why his grandfather looked so cold. "It is not about money, Sloan," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "It is about character. And you have none." Sloan grabbed Leo's shoulders, digging her nails into his jacket. "He is a Freeman," she shrieked. "He carries your name. He carries your DNA. You have a duty to him. You can hate us fine. Hate Darnell. Hate me. But you cannot deny him. He is the only future you have." Darnell stepped forward, looking broken and desperate. "Dad, please." Sloan is right. The boy is innocent. Whatever I did, whatever mistakes we made, do not punish Leo. He is your blood. I looked at Darnell. I looked at Sloan. And then I looked at Bradley, who was standing behind them next to his wife Tanisha. Tanisha was crying silently, looking at me with pleading eyes, hoping that the sight of the grandchild would soften my heart. They were all banking on biology. They were banking on the ancient rule that blood is thicker than water. They thought that no matter how much they abused me, I would never turn my back on a genetic link. I reached into the inside pocket of my jacket. I pulled out a white envelope. It was sealed with the logo of a genetic testing laboratory. "You keep talking about blood, Sloan," I said, holding up the envelope. "You keep talking about DNA as if it is a magic spell that excuses all your sins. You think that because this boy shares a genetic sequence with me, I am obligated to fund your lifestyle. I am not asking for me," Sloan lied, pulling Leo closer. "I am asking for your grandson." I took a step closer to her. I looked her dead in the eye. "That is the problem, Sloan," I said. "Leo is a beautiful boy. He is a sweet boy, and I will make sure he is taken care of. I have already set up a trust fund for his education that you cannot touch. But there is something you need to know, something that Darnell needs to know, and something that Tanisha definitely needs to know. "What are you talking about?" Tanisha asked, stepping forward, her voice trembling. I handed the envelope to Darnell. "Open it," I commanded. Darnell's hand shook as he took the envelope. He tore it open. He pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was a paternity test result. I had run the test using the hair sample I stole from Leo's cap and the hair sample I stole from Bradley's brush. Darnell read the paper. He blinked. He read it again. His knees buckled and he stumbled back against the concrete wall of the parking garage. "No," he whispered. "No. This is a mistake. This is not real." "Read it out loud, Darnell," I said. "Read it so your wife can hear you. Read it so your sister can hear you." Darnell looked up at Sloan. His eyes were filled with a horror so deep it looked like madness. The probability of paternity, he stammered, his voice barely a squeak. "For Bradley Miller is 99.9%. Silence. A silence so heavy it felt like the air had been sucked out of the garage. Tanisha froze. She looked at Darnell, then she looked at Sloan, and finally she turned her gaze slowly to her husband, Bradley. "Bradley Miller," she whispered. "My husband." Bradley took a step back, holding his hands up. "Tanisha, wait. It was a mistake. It was a long time ago. We were drunk. It meant nothing." Tanisha let out a scream that sounded like an animal being slaughtered. She lunged at Bradley, scratching at his face, punching his chest. "You slept with her. You slept with my brother's wife, my sister-in-law." Sloan tried to back away, but Darnell was faster. The man who had been a doormat for 15 years, the man who had let his wife control his every move, finally snapped. He dropped the paper and grabbed Sloan by the arm, spinning her around. "You cheated on me," he roared. "With him. With Bradley. In my house. While I was at work paying for your clothes and your cars, you were sleeping with my sister's husband." Sloan did not deny it. She did not cry. She just looked at him with pure venom. "Because you are not a man, Darnell," she spat in his face. "You are a weak, pathetic little boy." Bradley was the only real man in this family. At least he knew how to take what he wanted. Darnell raised his hand. For a second I thought he was going to hit her, but he didn't. He just let her go, pushing her away with disgust. He looked at Leo, the boy he thought was his son, the boy he had raised for 8 years. "Is he even mine?" Darnell whispered. "Is any of it mine?" Sloan laughed, a cruel, dry sound. "Nothing is yours, Darnell. You never owned anything. Not the company, not the house, and not even your son. You were just the bank account." Tanisha was on the ground now, sobbing hysterically, rocking back and forth. Her entire world had collapsed. Her husband was a traitor. Her sister-in-law was a predator. Her brother was a cuckold. And her father, the only stable force she had ever known, was standing there watching it all with eyes of ice. I walked over to Tanisha. I did not help her up. I simply looked down at her. "You wanted the truth, Tanisha," I said. "You stood in that courtroom and said you wanted justice. This is what justice looks like. It strips away the lies until there is nothing left but the ugly reality." I turned to Darnell, who was staring at the wall, completely catatonic. "And you, Darnell," I said. "You wanted to protect your family. You sacrificed your father to keep your wife happy. Now you see what that sacrifice bought you. You sold your soul for a woman who despised you and a life that was a lie." I looked at Sloan. She was standing defiant, adjusting her jacket, but I could see the fear in her eyes. She knew she had lost everything. Darnell would divorce her. Tanisha would destroy her. And she had no money to fight back. I signaled to Tevin. "Let us go." We walked toward the limousine. Behind us, the sounds of the family fighting escalated. Tanisha was screaming at Sloan. Bradley was trying to run away. Darnell was sliding down the wall, weeping. I opened the car door. I looked back one last time. Leo was standing in the middle of the chaos, holding his Batman backpack, looking around with wide, frightened eyes. He was the only innocent victim in this war. "Hirsch," I said as I got into the car. "Call Child Protective Services. Tell them there is a domestic disturbance and an endangered minor at this location. And call the trust attorney. Make sure Leo's fund is secure so that when he turns 18, he can get as far away from these people as possible." "You are a good man," Monty Hirsch said, closing the door. "I am not a good man," I said, leaning back into the seat as the car pulled away. "A good man would have saved them from themselves. I am just a gardener, Hirsch, and sometimes to save the garden you have to pull up the weeds even if the roots run deep." We drove out of the garage, leaving the screams of the Freeman family behind us. They were no longer my problem. They were just strangers fighting in a parking lot, victims of their own greed and lust. I had Tevin sitting across from me studying a file on our next acquisition. That was my future. The past was dead, and I had just thrown the last shovel of dirt on its grave. The months that followed the trial were a slow descent into a reality that my children had never prepared for. Justice is not always a gavel banging in a courtroom. Sometimes justice is the quiet, relentless grind of everyday life when you have been stripped of your privilege. Darnell was sentenced to 5 years in a minimum security facility for fraud and embezzlement. It was a light sentence by some standards, but for a man who had never worn anything cheaper than cashmere, it was a life sentence of humiliation. I received updates from his lawyer occasionally. Darnell was working in the prison laundry. The hands that used to sign checks he did not own were now folding sheets for other inmates. He had lost 30 pounds. The arrogance that had defined him was gone, replaced by a hollow shell of a man who spent his days staring at a concrete wall, wondering where it all went wrong. He wrote me letters every week. I never opened them. I had a box in my office where I deposited them unread. I did not need to read his apologies because apologies born from desperation are just another form of manipulation. Sloane faced a different kind of prison. She avoided jail time by pleading no contest to the assault charge and agreeing to 5 years of probation, but her social life was a death sentence. The video of her slapping me had made her the most hated woman in Atlanta. She could not walk into a grocery store without people whispering. She could not get a job in real estate because no broker would hire a liability. I heard from a mutual acquaintance that she was working the night shift at a diner on the outskirts of the city. A woman who once threw a fit because her white wine was too warm was now scrubbing grease off unparalleled tables and serving coffee to truck drivers who tipped in quarters. She was living the life she had mocked me for. Every time she wiped a table, she had to look at her own reflection in the formica and see the woman who threw away a fortune for the sake of her ego. Bradley had fled the state to escape his debts, leaving Tanisha to deal with the fallout of their sham marriage. Tanisha moved into a small studio apartment. She worked as a receptionist at a dental office, answering phones and being ignored by people who were wealthier than she was. She was alone. The friends she had tried to impress had vanished the moment the money did. They were all living the nightmare they had created, and there was no waking up because this was not a dream. It was the bill coming due. While my biological family was disintegrating, my chosen family was rising. The transition of power at Stone Holdings was seamless. Tevin Lewis did not just step into the role of CEO, he inhabited it with a grace that Darnell never possessed. I spent my days in the office not as a boss, but as a mentor. I watched Tevin navigate complex negotiations with a moral compass that pointed true north. One afternoon, we were sitting in my office reviewing the acquisition of a new shipping fleet. Tevin paused, looking at the contract. "Monty," he said, calling me by my name as I had asked him to. "This clause here, it squeezes the small suppliers too hard. We can make a profit without crushing them." I looked at him. Darnell would have seen that clause as a victory. He would have celebrated the extra 2% margin, but Tevin saw the human cost. "You are right," I said, smiling. "Change it. Fair trade builds loyalty, Tevin, and loyalty is the only currency that does not depreciate." He nodded, making the note. I watched him work. I watched the way he treated the cleaning staff with the same respect he showed the board members. I felt a warmth in my chest that I had not felt since Lucille died. It was pride, genuine fatherly pride. I realized that I had spent 15 years mourning a son who did not exist, while the son I needed was waiting for me to find him. We would eat lunch together in the break room. We talked about baseball. We talked about his upcoming wedding to a school teacher. He asked me to be his best man. When he asked me, I had to turn away to hide the tears in my eyes. My own son had banned me from his wedding photos. This young man who owed me nothing wanted me standing next to him at the altar. One evening, Tevin walked into my office. He was holding a picture frame. "I found this in the archives," he said. He placed it on my desk. It was an old photo of me and Lucille standing in front of my very first truck. We looked tired and dusty, but we were smiling. "I thought you should have this," Tevin said. "It is the foundation of everything." I looked at the photo. Then I looked at Tevin. "Thank you, son," I whispered. He squeezed my shoulder. "Go home, Monty. You have worked enough." I drove home that night feeling lighter. The hole in my heart where Darnell used to be was not empty anymore. It was filled with the knowledge that my legacy was safe. It was filled with the laughter of a young man who called me Monty but treated me like a father. I had lost a bloodline, but I had found a future. The final act of my liberation took place on a rainy Tuesday. I stood in the foyer of the mansion on Oak Street. The house was empty. The furniture had been auctioned off. The white rugs were gone, revealing the hardwood floors underneath. The smell of Sloan's lemon chemical cleaner had faded, replaced by the smell of old wood and rain. It was just a house now. The ghosts were gone. I walked through the rooms one last time. I walked into the dining room where I had spilled the ink on Bradley. I walked into the kitchen where Sloan had screamed about her wine. I walked into the storage room where I had slept on a cot. I stood there for a long time looking at the four walls that had been my prison. I did not feel anger. I felt a strange sense of gratitude. That room had been the crucible. It was where Montgomery Freeman died and M.J. Stone was fully born. I walked back to the front door where a real estate agent was waiting. She was a kind woman who knew nothing of the history of the house. "Here are the keys," I said, placing them in her hand. "Thank you, Mr. Stone," she said. "We have a buyer, a young couple. They are very excited to start their lives here." "Good," I said. "Tell them to open the windows. Let some fresh air in." I walked out onto the porch. Mr. Hirsch was waiting in the car. I had one last stop to make. We drove to the headquarters of the Atlanta Senior Support Foundation. It was a modest building that provided legal aid and housing for elderly people who had been abandoned or abused by their families. I walked into the director's office. She was a woman named Sarah who had been fighting an uphill battle for funding for years. "Mr. Stone," she said, standing up surprised. "To what do we owe this honor?" I sat down and pulled a check from my pocket. It was the proceeds from the sale of the house on Oak Street, every single penny, $2.5 million. "I want to make a donation," I said, sliding the check across the desk. Sarah picked it up. Her eyes went wide. Her hands started to shake. "Mr. Stone, this is enough to build a new wing. This will save hundreds of people." "Why?" I looked at her. I thought about the cold soup. I thought about the storage room. I thought about the thousands of old men and women who were sitting in rooms just like that right now, waiting for a phone call that would never come. "Because no one should have to sleep in a storage closet," I said. "And because I want to make sure that when people get old, they know they still have value." I stood up. "Use it well, Sarah. Give them dignity. That is all anyone really wants." I walked out of the building into the rain. I did not run to the car. I let the rain hit my face. It felt clean. It felt like a baptism. I had sold the symbol of my children's greed and turned it into a sanctuary for their victims. I had taken the poison and turned it into medicine. I got back into the car. Hirsch looked at me in the rearview mirror. "Where to now?" Mr. Stone, Hirsch asked. I smiled. For the first time in 15 years, the smile reached my eyes. "Let us go to the ballpark, Hirsch," I said. "Tevin says his nephews are playing Little League. I think it is time I learned how to be a grandfather again." The car pulled away into the traffic. I watched the city pass by. I was 68 years old. I had been broken. I had been betrayed. I had been dead in the eyes of the law. But as I watched the world moving outside my window, I knew one thing for certain. I was alive. And for the first time in a long time, I was free. The engine of my 1984 Peterbilt hums a song I have known for 40 years. It is a deep, rhythmic vibration that travels up through the floorboards and settles into my bones. This truck is the only thing I kept from my old life. It is the only thing Darnell and Sloan never tried to take because they saw it as a piece of junk. They saw rust and grease where I saw freedom and history. To them, it was just an ugly reminder of where we came from, but to me, it is the chariot that built an empire. I am driving west on the interstate, leaving the skyline of Atlanta behind me. The sun is beginning to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of bruised purple and burning orange. I am not wearing the $3,000 suit of M.J. Stone today. I am wearing my old flannel shirt and my work boots. The windows are rolled down and the wind is hitting my face, carrying the scent of pine and asphalt. I look in the rearview mirror one last time. The city is shrinking, becoming a cluster of toy blocks in the distance. Somewhere in that city, my son is sitting in a cell staring at a concrete wall. Somewhere in that city, my daughter-in-law is scrubbing a table at a diner. Somewhere in that city, my daughter is sleeping on a futon in a studio apartment. For a moment, a wave of sadness washes over me. It is a heavy, suffocating feeling, the grief of a father who realized his love was not enough to save his children. I think about the birthdays I missed because I was on the road trying to earn enough money to buy them the things they wanted. I think about the tuition checks I signed, the cars I bought, the mistakes I forgave over and over again. I spent a lifetime trying to pave the road for them so they would never have to hit a bump. But I realized too late that by smoothing the path, I denied them the chance to learn how to walk. I crippled them with my generosity. I turned them into invalids of character who could not survive without my crutch. But as the city disappears completely from the mirror, the sadness lifts. It is replaced by a profound sense of peace. I did not destroy my family. I simply stopped holding it together with my own blood. I stopped being the host for their parasitic ambition. I am driving toward a new horizon now. I have a business to run with a young man who respects me. I have a grandson to protect. I have a legacy that will finally stand for something good. The road ahead is long, but the windshield is wide, and for the first time in 15 years, I'm excited to see what is around the next bend. This brings me to the hard truth that I want to share with you. The lesson that cost me my family but saved my soul. We live in a world that tells us forgiveness is always a virtue. We are told that family is everything, and that we must endure abuse simply because we share DNA. But I am here to tell you that is a lie. A name is just a collection of letters on a page. I changed my name from Montgomery Freeman to M.J. Stone in a single afternoon. The judge stamped a paper, and it was done. But changing my name did not change who I was. I was still the same man with the same heart and the same values. My children, however, proved that you cannot change your nature. Darnell could wear a $5,000 suit, but he was still a thief at heart. Sloane could live in a mansion, but she still had the soul of a beggar. You cannot paint over rot and expect the house to stand. The most dangerous thing you can do is let your love blind you to the reality of who people are. I spent years making excuses for them. I told myself they were just stressed. I told myself they were just ambitious. I told myself they would grow out of it. But when someone shows you they are a monster, believe them the first time. Do not let your kindness become the food that nourishes the demons who want to devour you. There is a difference between being a provider and being a prey. I was a prey for 15 years. I let them eat my dignity, my joy, and my peace. And what did I get in return? I got a slap in the face and a bed in a storage closet. If you are holding on to a relationship simply because of history or biology, you are digging your own grave. You have to be willing to cut the rope even if it hurts, especially if it hurts. Because if you do not cut the rope, they will drag you down into the abyss with them. I learned that respect is not given, it is commanded. When I was the nice old man asking for a place to sleep, they treated me like trash. When I became the powerful billionaire who demanded order, they feared me. It is a sad commentary on human nature, but it is the truth. Some people do not speak the language of love. They only speak the language of power. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to speak their language back to them until they understand that you are not to be trifled with. And now I turn the wheel over to you, my friends. I have bared my soul and shared the darkest chapter of my life with you. I am sitting here in the cab of this truck, wondering if I did the right thing. It is easy to feel righteous when you are winning, but in the quiet moments, the doubt still creeps in. So I want to know what you think. If you were in my shoes, would you have signed that check to bail Darnell out of jail? Would you have given Sloane one more chance for the sake of the grandchild? Or would you have done exactly what I did and burned the bridge to light the way forward? I want you to be honest with me. Have you ever had to cut off a family member to save your own sanity? Have you ever been the one who was underestimated and forgotten only to rise up and prove them wrong? Please leave your thoughts in the comments section below. I read every single one of them. Your stories give me strength and remind me that I am not alone on this road. If this story resonated with you, if you felt the anger and the vindication, please hit that like button. It helps more people find this message. And if you have not already, please subscribe to the channel. I have many more stories to tell, stories about justice, about resilience, and about the long winding road of life. Thank you for listening to an old truck driver. Thank you for riding shotgun with me on this journey. The sun is almost gone now, but the stars are coming out, and they look brighter tonight than they have in a very long time. Keep your hands on the wheel and your eyes on the road. And remember, never let anyone treat you like a passenger in your own life. You are the driver. You always have been. Until next time, take care of yourselves and take care of the ones who truly deserve your love. Goodbye for now. The road has taught me that you cannot carry someone who refuses to walk. For years, I thought love meant shielding my children from every storm. But I realized that by building a roof over their heads, I blocked them from seeing the stars. True generosity is not about giving people what they want. It is about giving them the tools to earn what they need. If you keep filling a cup that has a hole in the bottom, you are not being kind, you are just wasting water. You must have the courage to stop pouring and let them fix their own cracks before they drain you dry. Now I turn the wheel over to you. If you stood in that courtroom, would you have offered mercy, or would you have let the gavel fall just as I did? I read every comment because your wisdom fuels my journey. If this story sparked a fire in you, hit that like button and subscribe for more tales from the road. Until next time, keep your eyes on the horizon.